the Melee Stats podcast. I'm here, Edwin Budding, with YCZ6 and PracticalTAS, two other members of Melee Stats. Well, you'll notice that we have a special figure here, and this is Dr. Z. Now, for those of you who don't know who Dr. Z is, he's going to introduce himself right now and totally not be put on the spot by me. So, Dr. Z, why don't you introduce yourself to the people that don't know you?
Hello, my name is Dr. Z, and I am the head TO of Genesis, and I also work at Smash GG.
Excellent. So we got quite a show coming ahead of us. We're going to go over Get On My Level 2018, which is the super major from last weekend. And you might recognize PracticalTAS from the videos that were appearing in between sets and for his post-set analysis. So before we talk about the actual tournament itself, why don't we hear it from the man himself and let us know how...
Cutting out, Edwin. You're cutting out. I didn't hear what you said, Edwin.
Mr. Destructoid.
Just tell us about GOML. What was it like being an attendee?
Okay. Canadian majors are always fun because I don't often get the chance to go to majors because everything's in the States and I'm not, and traveling to the States as a Canadian for Smash tournaments is not very justifiable on a financial level at the very least. So it's a lot more fun when I can just have everybody come to Toronto instead. GOML, I actually skipped Friday because it was only crews and I think low tiers. So I ended up coming just on Saturday. I was actually burning the midnight oil, getting the last of those videos out. And Saturday, I went early in the morning, played doubles, went 0-4, played singles, almost went 0-2, but clutched out a set win. So I didn't go 0-6 on the weekend, which was my main goal. And then the rest of the day, I chilled in the VIP lounge and met like everybody and somehow didn't play that many friendlies. I was also a little bit nervous for Sunday, which was when I had my analyst segment at top 12 of Melee. I went backstage starting the Wii U top 8 to prep for that. And I was super nervous going into it because it was the first time my voice was being broadcast over the internet to a large crowd, and it just so happened to be 30,000 people at a Smash Major. So I was rough at the start, but we eventually reached a rhythm, and me and the Media XP guys who were doing the replays as I was talking, they calmed me down, and we eventually got some good content out. It didn't go too long, which is my main worry. My second worry was that I was going to freeze up and just like have a lot of dead time while I was talking, which thankfully didn't happen too many times. And yeah, beyond that, I met a lot of cool people. I met Homemade Waffles for the first time, and we geeked out about Melee a little bit and about how like we're both fans of each other.
It's funny.
Brandon's great when like you're talking to him and he knows who you are and he's a fan of yours. He's always very enthusiastic about stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. And also he was with Fendi. Fendi I met for the first time as well. And then we had for top 8, it was DJ and D1, who I think I had met both of them before once briefly, but they were a pleasure to work with as well. And then after my analysis segment, I was ready to go to the after party and then realized that I was dead tired and my voice was gone and I had a splitting headache. So I was just like, I'm going to go home and sleep.
Smart.
And yeah, I mean, maybe one day I'll go to a tournament after party, but last weekend was not that weekend. And as for the actual Melee being played, I thought the crowd was really into it. I really enjoyed every set that was played, even some of the Wii U sets, which is Not that rare, actually. I'm interested in Wii U, not so much as a competitor, but definitely as a viewer, just for the sheer ridiculousness of it. The way I put it is that everything in Wii U is cool the first time you see it. And so if you've never seen it, then everything is cool. In Melee, top 8 was hype with Axe, aMSa. Hungrybox winning was definitely a downer on the crowd, but the man deserves it. He's crazy good. Plup was awesome. Mewtwo King Puff was ridiculous. Zain with the ridiculous losers run. Pretty much everything that I saw in terms of gameplay was enjoyable.
So I want to mention something because I guess it leads into Zane's run as a general topic. But okay, so first off, who has me on their computer because I can hear myself?
I think it might be PTAS.
Oh. I don't know how to
Okay.
make that not happen.
That's all right. I'll deal with it. So with Zane's run, I feel like there's a tendency of people to overreact, not be reactionary, as someone on this podcast right now told me before the show. But there's always this knee-jerk reaction after someone has one big performance following Summit. And when Zane won Pound Underground, people immediately attributed his victory to the Summit growth, or not the growth, but the Summit boost. And then when he lost to Junebug at a weekly, and then when he lost to Hyprid in pools, people said, "Oh, Zane's been figured out." And I just feel like it's so easy to have those gut reactions, but then completely forget what you said when he goes and does the opposite of what you expect him to do, or what you say you expect him to do. I personally am not that surprised that he loses, that there is a world in which Zain loses a best of 3 Marth Ditto to a formerly top 100 Marth player. And the old school legends know who Hyprid is.
Yeah, Sheridan, you probably know a little better than me. I kind of came into NorCal on the tail of Hyprid's run. Do you want to tell the people
Yeah.
who this man is?
So I think Hyprid is from SoCal originally, or at least that's where he started playing Melee. And then he like went back and forth between NorCal and SoCal for school, and then going back home. And I mean, he was playing pre doc era, maybe like 2010, 2011. I want to say maybe as early as, and he was always just a pretty solid Marth that occasionally would take sets off of people, like way above his level. I don't know. I had never heard of him entering a tournament for like the last 2 years, I want to say almost. So I was surprised even just to see him at a tournament. But Edwin, like you said, like Marth Dittos can be really high variance. So best of 3 Marth Ditto against almost anyone. Somebody like Hyprid definitely has it in him.
Yeah, I mean
Yeah,
Hyprid
just
is he's the Marth master of the West Coast, right? Like,
yeah, just to sort of reiterate like how surprising it was that when Hyprid came onto the scene. The first time he was ranked in NorCal was in January 2013. He was ranked 13th. And then in June, he was ranked 5th. So he jumped 8 spots in the span of 5 months. And that put him above players like, Tafokin, Scar, Homemade Waffle, Silent Spectre, who were all sort of NorCal legends at that time. So he definitely made a splash back in the day. And he's moved to Canada, I believe.
I think he goes to school in Ontario.
Okay.
I
Yeah,
think, I'm
so
not sure.
it's definitely been a while since I've heard anything from him.
He's also like the dash dance guy. I believe that was the running
Yeah.
joke about him, that he just a
Totally.
dash dancer.
Yeah. I think before it was Zain, it was Hyprid. So it's only fitting that the old master took down the student one last time.
It's funny that Zain loses to the two people that embody his opponent's fear of himself. So he loses to the Dash Dance Master to get sent early to losers bracket, and he gets eliminated from the tournament by a guy that also dash dances a lot and gimps him at early percents by the ledge. So I think there's
Yeah.
a delightful bit of irony for people who don't like watching Zain play.
Yeah, I did want to ask you, Edwin, about Zane's record in Marth Dittos. I heard a rumor in Twitch chat that he's like 0-22 in Marth Dittos in tournament over the last couple of years or something. I'm sure that's an exaggeration, but I don't know if you've researched this, but it seems like he doesn't do too well. I know against Rishi in region and in Marth Dittos in general.
So Rishi generally beats him long term over his career, and Zain typically used to lose to Pew Pew and the Moon, I believe, or I think he actually only played the Moon once, but he also lost to Pew Pew twice in their previous two sets. And outside of the results, he just, even when you watch him play and you know his style, the entire Marth Ditto is based around holding position and getting mix-ups correctly. It's not as much, it's people say that in Marth Dittos that both Marths can destroy each other, but that's not telling the full story. If you get an opening in a Marth Ditto, it's more like a 50-50, where if you guess right, it can convert into a really big punish. But if you guess wrong, then the situation gets reversed, and the same can happen to you. It's not purely reactive like something like the Sheik Ditto chain grabbing is. It's more like you're constantly playing with dynamite, and the more position you have, the better it typically is. But it can blow up at any given moment because Marth has such a big threatening range. So when two Marths are on the screen, the combined threatening range that intercrosses with each other is very little. So there are different like executional barriers you have to cross in order to be consistently good at it. So Mute King is like the last gatekeeper of the executional barrier, where he just has this massive bag of Marth Ditto cheese that he unloads on his opponent. And it sounds really simplistic to say it, but just watch any of his sets and actually take a look at the interactions he wins and what he does to convert off of openings in the Marth Ditto. They're not like pure reactions. These are mostly guesses. And
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
Well, he's
positional
also
knowledge.
he's just got a really deep understanding of what that flow chart is, and you only have to be. You might only have to go like 2 or 3 moves down the flow chart to end somebody's stock in a Marth Ditto if you're by the ledge. And he knows what to look for, and he's able to execute on it basically every time.
And he executes on it despite typically being in a position where he's actually losing the positional battle. But he is so good at that thing, so to where a typical advantage in the Marth Ditto, which is holding position, doesn't mean anything against Mutaking because his knowledge of that situation just is completely beyond his opponents, except for PP when they played. But that's because PP crossed that executional threshold. So the Marth Ditto has these different levels of executional thresholds, and I don't think Zain has crossed the top one yet. So I guess to answer your question, I think by the eye test, it's a relatively weak matchup of his. But Jackzilla, not to call him out on anything, he said that he was 1-10 in the Marth Ditto over the last 2.5 years, which is just not true. Like, he has won the matchup before it. I think that the stats he was using was from Tafo stats from 2016 to 2017.
Right.
Which I don't think is
sounds right.
predictive of his performance in the Marth Ditto personally.
Yeah, here it says he's 4-6 against Rishi since 2017, so that's not too bad.
Yeah, Edwigi, actually, the MTVA stats keeper, said 4-14 with Rishi in 2017.
Oh,
Rishi, I think is
the
the converse, where he is very good at the Marth Ditto.
for sure.
There was one. I think it was when I watched them play at Summit. I was watching Zain, Muji King, and at one point, I couldn't tell what Muji King started doing differently, but I was like, oh no, Zain's getting cheesed now, and Muji King just kind of ended the entire set from like they were 1-1 in the set, I think, and Muji King just ended the entire set, just stock after stock of flowchart Marth bullshit.
Mutaking can definitely do that once he like figures out which archetype you are. It just counters that hard.
Speaking of cheese, though, did you guys see Zain destroy none? I was not expecting that.
I thought you were gonna say something very different, but I actually missed that set. I want to go back and watch it. I was surprised. Actually, I wanted to about Zain's run more in general. So after he lost to Hyprid, he played against, who was it, Crispy Smooth in pools, and he went Fox for game 2 and lost a game. So he won that set 2-1 to make it out of pools. And then he didn't lose another game until top 16 when he played Shroomed.
That set was really close, by the way.
Yeah.
That set had, oh my god, the last stock on game 5 was, it was kind of embarrassing.
It was pretty
Game
bad
five-
melee.
Game
I'm
5
like,
melee, man. That's how melee goes. People don't realize
Last stock
when
melee
you're
is
like
fucking insane.
when you're like a new viewer and you see these big tournaments and you're like, oh, this must be, you know, the highest level of melee that's ever been played. And it's like, no, actually people play really bad in those situations.
when Shroom transformed back while still being within,
Good god.
Oh, Jesus.
I knew the set was over. I was like, if Zain messes up this punish, like he should be disqualified from the next tournament.
So, you know, Transform does have a couple frames of invincibility where the character doesn't exist. And I played a set against Bartle where he like recovered he transformed to recover, made it back on stage, hit me off, and I shot right away, and he transformed, the charge shot missed him, and then he edge guarded me and I lost.
Ooh.
So
But I
can
think
happen.
it's like at the beginning that invincibility is.
Yeah, it's like it's in the middle approximately. So it's hard to do that when they're on stage and you're Marth and you can just charge forward smash.
It's particularly like as the character is changing. So like there's startup lag and end lag, but in the middle it's invincible.
I guess you want to talk about some other players. I noticed I was looking through the bracket again in preparation, and I noticed that of the people in the top 8, 3 of them actually started the top 24 in losers. So Zain was one of those. The other 2 were Swedish and SFAT. So they both also had pretty good losers runs at the tournament. So Swedish, he lost to Luna, and then he beat Lacroix, Legend, aMSa, KJH, and Crush. So I think a lot of those are pretty good wins. Legend obviously beat Kirby Kaze at Shine, so he's no slouch in the matchup. aMSa, probably you would say he has the disadvantage on NTSC. Sheik Dittos maybe doesn't have as much experience, but KJH and Crush, you know, both definitely proficient foxes in that matchup. So I feel like there's a pretty good tournament for Swedish.
I think those are really good wins, especially because of the perception that follows James against Fox, where I think when people see Swedish versus a top 50 Fox, they typically think that's a scary matchup for him because he has a history of losing that to players like Orion Ford, Mike Hayes, Jerry type players, you know. So to beat KJH and Crush, I think is a really good set.
Yeah, and then on the other side we had SFAT. So I think his run was probably would not consider as good. So he lost to Crush in winners right before top 24, and then he beat Ryan Ford, La Luna, and Lucky, but then he lost to Zain as well. So I think SFAT, you know, a player who is supposed to be top 10, I think not the greatest run. Obviously Crush and Zain are on the rise, but I think, you know, you would want to see something more impressive from him if he's supposed to maintain his spot in top 10.
So
Yeah.
quick question about the Swedish thing. Did any of you guys hear what I said about him at all or no?
Yeah.
Okay.
I
Just want to make sure. I thought my video cut out for a second.
Oh, yeah,
And
no problem. I just wanted to sort of get through everything.
No, yeah, I think the fact that SFAT's run got ended by Zain just sort of solidifies the whole kind of small changing of the guard that's happening at the bottom of the top 10, where Zain has sort of infiltrated that space and I guess replaced SFAT. Unless I'm miscounting and SFAT is still top 10 if Zain is in there.
Edwin, Tell us.
Edwin,
You cut out the last part, so I never heard the end.
I was just saying that it feels like Zain beating SFAT at GOML sort of just solidifies what we kind of already have been talking about, which is that Zain seems to have sort of lapped SFAT and replaced him in the top 10, unless I'm counting wrong, and SFAT is still top 10 with Zain above him.
I'd have to think about it. I think right now it's hard to not put Zain above him, right? What has SFAT done lately?
Right.
Well, so the top 10, I mean, so you have the top 6, you have Axe and Wizzy, I think you would have to say are
Probably.
definitely top 10. And then the contenders would be Zain, SFAT, Crush, aMSa. That's probably it.
Yeah.
So that's 4 people for those 2 spots.
I feel like of those 4, it kind of has to be aMSa and Zain right now.
Could you argue Crush above SFAT?
I don't know. I'd have to look at the results more. I don't have as encyclopedic knowledge of results as some people in Melee Stats.
Because I think Crush is definitely trending upwards, not at least in terms of quality of play. Like when I saw the Crush versus Hbox set that went to last stock, I think had you shown that set to people without telling them who the Fox was, they would have assumed that it was something like, oh, SFAT is probably playing really well. Like Crush did to Hbox what many people think is like SFAT's underdog shot, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So I think it shows that the thing that SFAT had over Crush, which was that we thought SFAT at least had a puncher's chance of beating Hbox or a similarly tiered player.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact that Crush has shown himself capable of doing that, at least to me on the smell test, shows that SFAT does not have that advantage over Crush moving forward into predicting
Right.
how to do
So Crush also did actually beat SFAT at GOML.
Yeah,
so.
and I'm saying in addition to beating SFAT, he did what many thought that SFAT would hold the advantage over him for.
Yeah, but actually it turns out, SFAT outplaced him, right? SFAT made it into top 8 and
because Crush lost to Swedish.
Because he lost to Swedish. And SFAT had some decent wins, right? Ryan Ford, Lulu, and Okie, not bad wins, certainly. Whereas Crush, he beat SFAT, but he didn't do too much other than play well against Hungrybox. So this tournament I feel like is kind of a wash between the two of them.
Yeah, I guess when you put it like that, you're losing to Swedish, I guess, for Crush isn't a great loss.
It depends how much you value, playing well against Hungrybox. Like, are you a type of person who says that, only the results matter, and if you lose the set, then who cares? Or do you think that is like a relevant factor?
It depends on if it's a sustainable thing. Like if SFAT and Hbox play 7 sets and Hbox wins 6 of them by last stock or in clutch situations, then I think that shows some kind of sustainable gap that can keep going on. So I guess with Hbox and Crush, it's just more that it shows that the top of Crush's skill range isn't that far away from SFAT. If that's what
Sheridan, do you have any thoughts on like that top 10 battle?
I think it's going to take me a little more time to kick SFAT out of there. It has been a while since he's had like a really surprising win. I mean, he hasn't. I don't know how close he's gotten to Hungrybox lately, but I mean, I'm also still not 100% sold on aMSa.
Okay.
I mean, he's definitely top 12, but I don't know about 10. It's a matter of just how sustainable that is, and it's a matter of whether you think the top 10 is to reflect results or to try to predict the future. And I think I always I think of it more as predictive. But if you are somebody who thinks the top 10 has to just reflect results, then that's where somebody like aMSa would probably kick out SFAT instead.
Okay, so you're saying that aMSa might be on a kind of like a shootout trajectory, I guess, like 2017 shootout where he like peaked really high.
Clarify what you mean by that.
Like
I don't think
could fall off.
I don't know if he would fall off as hard as Chute did. Yeah, but I feel like I think what happened to the ice climbers just in general can happen to aMSa, but it won't be anywhere near the same magnitude. It really depends on how much people are actually going to try to start studying Yoshi.
Hmm.
Do you think?
Which, if there's only one Yoshi, then to do it. And if that's the case, then people are only going to practice against Yoshi when they actually meet him in bracket.
Yeah, I was gonna ask, do you think it's possible that there's sort of an explosion of Yoshi players in the same way that there was sort of an explosion of Ices players after Wobble's run at EVO, which you can read about on meleestats.com.
No, you can read about it on
I think-
bignote.com. It's
well,
not
I
on
think
Meleestats.
My bad.
there's an appeal to the Ices explosion that is not there with Yoshi. Like, you can wobble and you can get pretty far, like as far as like the amount of training that you have to do to get wins. Like wobbling is unquestionably just like the most value added thing in the game. Yoshi doesn't have anything like that. He's almost certainly underdeveloped, but also the counter meta is still underdeveloped too. So I don't know if I don't think we're going to see a bunch of Yoshis that we haven't already seen start to come up hard.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because of just the different playstyles of the two characters. I think it's possible that we will see more Yoshi players, but I think like the types of people who would want to play Yoshi are different from the types of people who would want to play Ices. Not to like get too deep into the whole character stereotype thing, because I actually really dislike that. But when you see aMSa play, like the thing that you're impressed by is like his crazy movement, his long combos on floaties, which a lot of characters aren't able to do, and I guess even his ledge stalling is cool, right?
Yeah, I was gonna say I'm curious to see how much further he can push the ledge stalling tactics. I'm actually a very big fan of that.
Yeah,
But we
yeah.
have seen some anti-ledge stalling technology come out though. Like with, I saw something about like where you can dash attack like the egg
I was
that
gonna say that.
cancels. That's So it's things like that that people didn't even know existed until 6 months ago. At least not like we're widely aware of. That could really like change the meta, because until that point, like when aMSa's on the edge just throwing eggs and you have only seen that like in videos, you just leave the ledge and just try to avoid getting hit and let aMSa back on the stage.
Yeah.
Or you eat 30% for no reason.
Yeah. I think you could say the same thing with ice climbers, right? I think, when would you say the like wave of anti-ice climbers tech started to come in? Because I feel like there was some before Wobble's run, but I feel like it didn't really start happening until maybe 2014, 15. And like I think Mango versus Nintendo at Genesis was kind of the exhibition of how far that matchup had been pushed by the anti-ice
especially
side.
right after Nintendo had beaten Mewtwo King the previous.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, good
even
point.
still, I feel like the anti-ice climbers tech wasn't taken as seriously in like the top 50 or like the 50 to 100 level, and there were just a huge amount of ice climbers getting wins as late as last year, but it's dropped off a lot. But I think a big difference between Yoshi and ice climbers is, even if we get as many Yoshis as we do ice climbers, like playing and being inspired by aMSa, their trajectory is going to be much shallower. Like,
Sure.
they're not going to reach their potential as quickly as the ice climbers were.
Yeah, I think.
Man, what a sad prospect for Marth players. Imagine going to
Oh
tournaments
my
and just
god.
being around Yoshi setups.
Of course, you had to bring it back to Marth
That's
players.
the only thing I could think of. It's actually the only way I can fathom things when I get a metagame. How will it affect Marth? And with Yoshi's, it would be a lot more annoying. That's for sure. Not that we would lose the matchup, but just that it's annoying. That's all I'll say.
So going back to GOML, I think, were there any other sort of interesting moments or matches that you wanted to talk about. I had a couple picked out. The first one was Heartstrings beat Kirby Kaze.
Oh yeah, I was very
which was
surprised.
notable because
Yeah.
Kirby Kaze is one of those players who will go away for 6 months and then come back and then get top 8 in the national. But in this case, he lost to Heartstrings and then he wait, what happened after that? He didn't make it into top 24.
I think he lost to Slocks.
Right, he lost to Slocks. So, not what you would expect out of like a top 50 player probably. So
Well, Slocks is pretty good at that matchup though, or he
Sure,
has
sure.
experience playing it, so I
Yeah.
don't think it's that. I think the losing to Heartstrings thing. I know KK. Maybe this is confirmation bias, but I'm pretty sure that I remember a few times, like 2 years ago or even a year and a half ago, where KK talked about not liking the chain grab ditto and how he was just going to do it from now on, and how he wasn't going to how he didn't like the matchup, but he was just going to chain grab. So maybe it's just the volatility of the Sheik ditto. Heartstrings, strong regional player, beating someone like KK. Obviously it's an upset, but I would say it was within the realm of possibility.
Did anybody here see that set, by the way? Was it recorded? PTAS, did you see it maybe?
I didn't see it. I don't know if it was recorded or not.
All right.
Well, sorry.
Anyway, the other thing was, I guess, Moky. That was sort of the
Yes.
story of
I'll
the
be right
early
back.
tournament.
Hero.
Yeah,
Moky.
so Moky, it was interesting because he benefited from two things. Wizrobe dropping out, obviously, was the person projected to get out of his quadrant of the bracket. And then also, Ice beat Hugs, and then he beat Ice. So that's how he got into top 24 on winner's side. So it's kind of hard to evaluate his run because, him beating Ice was basically the one thing that really stood out in terms of his run. But, he had one of those runs where he plays pretty well and then he gets ninth, right? So kind of like a Ken at Evo type situation. So, I think people were, I know people in chat were pretty hyped about even the matches that he lost, right? Against Mewtwo King, he took a game. Against Zain, he took a game. So I was curious what you guys thought about his performance.
Okay, so Leon, I'm gonna be real with you right now. I was thinking about Ice, but I got distracted because I noticed that Blur posted a tier list.
Oh my god, are you
So-
serious?
Literally just right now.
So I'm going to
Who cares? Who cares about tier lists? Oh my god.
I'm
Don't
going
make me go
to
on my
table this
rant about
discussion
why
now
tier lists
to
are stupid.
really talk about the real news,
Oh my god.
which is that Blur
Oh,
has put Pikachu from 5 to 10.
5 to 9, I think.
Or 5 to
top
9.
9 character Pikachu.
Alright,
Why is
well,
Pikachu in the same tier as Falcon and Sheep?
Why is
alright.
Pikachu in the same tier as Sheik?
Blur has interesting opinions about Melee.
Why is
Not
Marth
exactly,
number
not
1?
exactly news.
Interesting.
Why is Marth number 1?
Why is
I
why
don't know if
is
that's one or
Pikachu-
just one or two. Unless they're ordered within tiers.
We've
Well,
lost
This
it.
Blur
is
was
such
the
a
first
Marth
person-
main tier list.
Yeah.
Blur was the first person to predict Zane's rise, am I right? Nobody else knew about him until Blur started talking about him.
Right. And of course there's shades of peak Blur in Zain. We all know that.
Yeah.
He's
Alright, can we
Blur
get
had
back to GOML?
theorized all this stuff.
Let's get back to GOML. Let's get back to
Okay.
GOML.
What you guys are no fun. We have an opportunity to roast someone for putting Pikachu arguably 5th.
The best roast we can give him is to not talk about it.
There we go. Let's go,
Yeah.
PTAS.
Do you-
Okay, yeah.
is
So
it
those-
And before Blur shows up in chat.
he's probably here already.
Leon, one point about Ice though that you did bring up that I want to briefly acknowledge is that
Mhm.
heading into a set against Hugs, if you had told me he was going to beat him, I would have honestly guessed that it would be some wacky counterpick like him going Sheik or something. I would have given this Fox little to no chance against Hugs, and that was pleasantly surprising as someone who likes watching Ice play.
Yeah, what was that set on stream? I don't think I saw it.
I don't think it's off stream.
On the second stream, so like even though I was on for top 24, I missed a bunch.
Oh, okay.
I mean,
Yeah,
he
maybe
ended
I'll
up
go back and
losing to
watch that.
Moky later, which I think speaks more volumes to how good Moky is and or
Uh-huh.
what the top of his skill range and the faster matchups is. But I will say Moky did get kind of lucky. I talked about him maybe having an outside shot at upsetting Wizrobe last week, but obviously he ended up not playing Wizrobe because Wizrobe DQ'd before the tournament.
Mhm.
So I guess based strictly on the data, what we saw from Moky was him winning a Fox Ditto against a returning top like 30, 35-ish level Fox player, and him showing a lot of really cool moments against Music King and Zain, but
Yeah.
still losing. So I don't want to overreact on what this tournament means for Moky, but at least from the eye test, it's definitely cool that he did well.
Yeah, and I mean, if your only losses are Mute King and Zain, well,
Yeah, like those aren't bad losses. It's just
yeah.
it just
Oh.
I don't, which is good, but not
Robot.
like
Edwin.
how
Yeah,
not
yeah,
good
yeah.
now.
So in terms of Moky's trajectory, I don't want to sort of circle jerk too hard. Do you think he's, is he the next Crush, or is he gonna sort of fizzle out like, generic Fox not to be named? There's been lots of examples.
I'll put Moky I'll group Moky with like Jerry's Fox, not his Jigglypuff. I'll group Moky in with Jerry's Fox, IBDW, like the below Absent Page but rising top 50-ish or under. Or, well, Moky maybe it's a little early to say top 50, but like the Rising Fox, the Rising Fox Brigade. I'll put it like that.
Yeah,
I think that's fair,
sounds
right?
fair.
Yeah, he definitely goes in one of those tiers of foxes. I can't quite figure out which one yet, but one of those tiers of foxes that are just like they're good at Fox and therefore they're good at Melee, and they're somewhere on the top 100, but it's hard to tell.
There's a really funny Twitch chat comment I saw, which is Moky plays like an off-brand Ice, but Ice is playing off-brand or like off-brand Ice right now. Also,
Nice. Yeah, he definitely has the
I thought
movement.
it's a little, but yeah, it's pretty funny.
Actually, since we're still on we're back on the topic of GOML, I just wanted to mention the video stuff that I did for the stream, which is basically the practical tips and the moments of GOML, which were just like sort of short interstitial content for breaks, so that instead of just having like an ad roll or like a generic timer, they actually had some cool stuff for people to look at while production was setting up whatever was coming next. And the moments of GOML were cool. They were sort of parodying like a 90s documentary or documentary style clips from Canada's like back in the 90s. And those are interesting, but the more interesting to me is the practical tip series, because I really feel like those can be like continued going forward. And like if other like tournament organizers, Sheridan, were interested in having that same kind of content at their events, then really hit me up, because I'm very open to making that a thing, a recurring thing going forward. I think it'd be really cool.
Stick with it.
Yeah, I was curious to hear your thoughts, both of you guys, on that topic. Like, especially Sheridan, working at Smash GG, I'm sure you've had exposure to more esports than you did previously. So if you look at stuff like League and Overwatch and other similar kind of big esports, the analyst desk is like a big feature on those streams, right? And I think Melee and even other fighting games haven't done that as much. I think the first big attempt was at the Big House 6, which I think people generally thought was not the greatest experience. I thought the GOML analyst segments went a lot better than those, actually. So
It's
what do you
hard to
think
do
about
right.
that type of content for a tournament stream?
Yeah, it's hard to do right for Smash because of just the format of the event. The reason it's so great and it's easy to do in League and Overwatch is people are playing for a long time, and then the match is done, and they have a break. Like
Yeah.
when the league match finishes, like the team goes back, like gets off the computer, they go back to their room, and they talk about it for like 10 or 15 minutes or whatever it is, and then they come back out. That's a lot of time that you have to fill, but it also leaves you open with a lot of possibilities for what you can do with an analyst desk segment. With Smash, you may have 5 minutes between sets, and
Mhm.
so you have to really pare down what you're going to talk about, and it kind of limits like the kind of format of the content that you can put in there. There's still a lot of cool things we can do, but we can't just rip one-to-one off of what League and Overwatch do.
Yeah. Sorry, you were cutting out a little bit there as well, but I think I got the gist of it. Yeah, I think it's interesting because a lot of more tournaments recently have been doing replays between sets, which seems like a good direction to go because those are a great way of sort of filling the downtime that you normally have while people are warming up and trying to find the people who are supposed to be on stream next and stuff like that. And I think GOML did a pretty good job in top 8 of sort of, I guess, parallelizing the analyst desk segments with the preparation for the next set. And it seems like there wasn't that much downtime. And in fact, the analyst desk, if anything, seemed to reduce the amount of downtime that there was in between sets. So I don't know. I guess PracticalTAS, obviously you were the person who was most involved with this. Do you have any thoughts on how that went from a production side?
Yeah, I feel like we only really had the time to focus on like one moment, or there were a couple segments that we did where we just took sort of a couple generic clips and talked about how like the set progressed. But I really think the best ones were the ones that showed off my strengths, which were specifically where I could just break down a moment in depth and be like, okay, so this Thunder killed Hungrybox because it was a cross up and he messed up on the DI because of
Yeah.
the cross up, or like this was a Phantom and that's why Axe got KO'd there. And being able to focus on like a single moment, I feel doesn't interrupt the flow of the set, and also adds some insight that specifically the commentators might not notice or might be confused about. There was definitely uh, one set, I think it was Zain SFAT, I think, where they specifically called out and said, "Hey, press TAS, explain what that was." And
Oh yeah.
so the set went a couple more games, so we had the time to go over that, replay it a couple times backstage, and I was like, okay, I can actually explain how this combo worked. And so things like that, where it's like I have one moment that I want to focus on, I felt went really well. Um, and also didn't interrupt the flow of the whole production of the event.
Mhm.
So I do feel like if Melee is going to see analyst desks like that, I feel like that's the format that we have to go with. Because otherwise, you could just cut to the commentators and have them talk about it.
Right. Yeah, I did want to say I was really impressed with the production of GOML in general. Like, I thought all their overlays were super clean, good transitions. They never like missed the start of the match like some streams that have similar things tend to do. Um, so yeah, shout outs to the team over there. I'm actually not sure who exactly was involved with that, so I feel a little bad about that. Do you guys know?
It's the Media XP team. They do Genesis as well. They do fantastic work. I cannot shout them
Oh,
out enough. They're
okay.
amazing
Yeah.
guys.
They're super underappreciated. Like they just don't get the like most people in Smash don't know who Media XP is, which is really a shame because they may have the highest like technology level of all the production teams that continuously work with Smash. They're based in Canada. Ken, you may have heard of Ken Silva. He is a part of the Genesis team, and he works with Media XP, and just extremely professional people that I really hope that they can do more events besides just GOML. I think they did EGLX as
Yeah.
well.
They did EGLX, the whole thing for EGLX, so like the Hearthstone and everything.
Oh wow.
So yeah, they were running they were running Play Hearthstone, the Twitch stream.
Oh nice.
Yeah.
So yeah, they're Yeah. Notice to
Sheridan,
salute for sure.
Yeah, Sheridan, I thought of a question for you about that actually. So, in basically, if you had unlimited resources and you were running top 8 of a super major, what would you want to happen between sets on the stream? Like, so we've seen replays, we've seen analysis. You know, for Evo, they had stuff like player profiles in between sets where they like went over the strengths and weaknesses of different players, what characters they play, stuff like that. Like, what kind of stuff do you imagine being like the optimal tournament experience if there were no restrictions?
I think it would be interesting to. So if you have top 8 going on like another day, or, I'm sorry, a different day from like top 64, I think it would be great to put together like 30 to 60-second clips of each like first matchup of top 8 to kind of just give a little bit of narrative to the story coming in, like maybe clips of past matches, some voiceover of like just who these people are, what their play style is, what their journey through the community has been. For like a big tournament, you're going to reach a lot of people and just give them a sense of like not just what matches they are, like not just how to understand like the actual match that's happening, but like putting it in the context of the history of the game and the community. And I think that's like we're still kind of missing out on some of that stuff there. But
You mean
that
kind of like
takes,
a narrative building before the set?
Exactly. Like we rely on commentators to do that for us, and typically they do a great job. But I think there's a lot more we can do with like prepared videos, clips for that.
It's also just tough because sometimes, like, if you're trying to anticipate a matchup that comes ahead of time, like, this is obviously much later in bracket, but let's say you have Mango Armada coming up in like, even winners quarters, I guess, today, or like winner semis coming up, and they're expected to play, but one of them bows out. And instead the person on the spot has to make a really quick preview video about like Mango versus like SFAT or something.
Yeah.
Like, it's very difficult to put in a lot of research into something and have it end up not working out. But people do it in pro sports all the time.
Definitely. And
some
that's
reason,
kind of one advantage that Genesis and other like if you use the same format where top 8 happens the day after, like top 8 is set at the end of day 2, then people have time to go back and make content.
Yeah.
I think what Zain did is really cool for that. The HTC, especially before the Hbox 11 sets. I think that kind of stuff is really good for getting people into the game and even like first time viewers to actually be invested in the outcome of the set.
Yeah. That stuff was great.
Zain is an Ipengu.
Yes.
Yeah, Zain is an
Ipengu,
not edge cancel MDVA Marth Zain.
Yeah.
Speaking of another Marth, I think I said before the show that I wanted to avoid discussion on Mewtwo character or acknowledging his Jigglypuff. But I guess in a nutshell, do we think this is going to be an actual thing moving forward, or you think it's just him being wacky for a tournament?
Yeah, Puff's S tier. He's going to play Puff when he feels it's optimal.
Sheridan, as the resident Axe Slayer in this group.
I need the person who defeated Axe and Puff Pikachu to.
Well, it was only one game. It wasn't a full set.
So as many as Mewtwo so.
Ooh.
Yeah, it's a good matchup for Puff. I think, I don't know. I've heard people, complain about him when he picks Sheik, because that usually just means he's lost confidence in his Marth or Fall case maybe for that day. But I mean, maybe that's the time to think about bringing out Sheik instead of Puff.
Yeah, I feel like analyzing Mewtwo character choices, you kind of just end up going in circles. You're like,
yeah,
I feel like
it's so much. You end up trying to psychoanalyze Jason instead of like anything else.
I just don't understand.
because
like,
maybe he just saw Hungrybox beat Axe,
Yeah.
and as we know, like Jason has a habit of whatever the last match that happened to him in that particular matchup, that's the way the matchup goes.
So now Puff Pikachu is 50-50 according to MTK. He
Sure.
won one game and lost one.
it just seems like such a bizarre time to make a character choice. Like, it's not like he was down 0-2 in the set and he decided, I got to go with my backup plan here. It's like he split the first 2 games and then just went to Puff, and then went to Fox, and then went back to Puff. Like, it made no sense.
I think he did it for the fans because he hit that 666.
For the fans.
The fans who love Jigglypuff.
No, he actually had a sub goal on his stream. If he hit 666 subs, then he would unlock Jigglypuff and use him whenever he felt Puff was optimal. And so that turned out to be against Axe.
Okay.
Go figure.
I think he'll bring him out against Chudat, and that's all I'll say. That's all I'll say for the rest of Mewtwo's Puff.
Oh god, they're gonna play Puff Dittos.
Oh, it's gonna be Mewtwo King's Puff and choose Fox.
Ooh, even better.
Give me Mewtwo's Puff
Puff
any
Dittos
day of
are
the week.
not as Puff Dittos aren't as bad as you think they are.
Actually,
Yeah,
choose
they're-
gonna whoop
fine.
Mewtwo King's Puff in Puff Ices.
Also true.
All right, let's not talk about this anymore. I think we reached the
Good
5-minute
idea.
limit of talking about Mewtwo's Puff.
Oh, yeah.
Acknowledging. Is there anything we want to say about Plup Hbox, or is this one of the? It was pretty similar to Nudes in that Plup looked great in
Yes.
winners, and then Hbox just came through in losers.
Yeah, it's interesting how this sort of like cross-tournament storyline has developed between Plup and Hbox, where it's like Plup always wins winners finals, and then either the tournament is Genesis or Nudes, right? Like where he Hungrybox always wins the first set of grand finals in relatively convincing fashion, and then after that it's either like Hungrybox whoops him or Plup like clutches it out.
Well, this one was a
So-
3-2 the first set, right?
Yeah,
That's
so
true.
Less
Yeah.
convincing
So this is actually a little bit backwards.
and
but-
more convincing set too. Yeah.
It kind of feels like Plup is slowly but surely just making improvements in the matchups, and like quickly, like before it always felt like the first set of grand finals was just basically like Plup getting warmed up and just getting ready to like play the second set ahead of time, that he didn't really like. He's just like kind of making his adjustments slowly, but
Now
like
he will
they're
try.
slowly maturing, becoming faster.
One
Mhm.
thing that this is maybe a small thing, although like I think Hungrybox got at least 4 rests out of this over the course of their sets, but when Puff up throws Fox and there's a platform there, Hungrybox will up air to try to mess with like the tech timing on the platform. And I'm pretty sure Plup missed every single one of those
Yeah.
and got rested.
Yeah, which is
4
like instant
times.
rest, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like Puffs have been doing that for like at least 10 years. So
Yeah.
it's just a little it's a little surprising to me that Puff didn't hit a single one of those techs.
Yeah,
Or
it's
if he did, it was like completely washed out of my memory by the misses.
it's a tech trap, but it's definitely like not impossible to do if you know the timing. You need to like tech you need to tech the up throw earlier than you think you need to, and then tech the up air later than you think you need to.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Or you can even, I mean, how many Puffs ever like actually experiment with like trying to bait out the the late tech? Like
Yeah.
you can just even not tech the up throw to begin with,
Yeah.
and just
'Cause
only
nobody-
wait for the hit.
Nobody like tries to think that you're going to not tech it.
Mhm.
Exactly.
I feel
exactly.
like that might be the type of thing where you need to just like sit down with a Puff player and have them up throw you a bunch of times and like mix up what they're gonna do, and then you can get used to like treating the situation as a mix up, which it is, rather than just always doing the same thing.
Wait,
by
what?
instinct.
No,
I think
stop giving
just-
Crunch ideas. This is bad.
I think you just
I
I
know,
think
this
you
is good
just
for the Fox.
assume, I think you assume they're gonna up air and tech that, and just keep doing that even if you miss a couple techs on the up throw until you actually get punished by it, until Puff actually
Yeah.
proves that they can punish you for it.
Mhm.
Wait, so quick question. So if Fox techs on the platform, isn't that still reactable by Puff to follow it to position themselves?
Yeah, but you also have to be in position to begin with there.
Oh, okay.
Like, I mean, the nice thing about up air to miss tech rest is you're already right there and can react to it. That's not always going to, and like the timing's a little different for up throw and no up air and then miss tech rest.
Yeah.
It's like, it might, I mean, it's pretty unexplored. I'm guessing it's probably not very difficult, but again, I think it's one of those things where it's uncommon enough that you might as well just wait until the puff actually proves that they're going to do that to you.
Yeah,
Sure.
it's definitely like the kind of thing that I don't think Hungrybox does. So I feel like if you're going to try to get into that sort of mix-up war with him, you're gonna have to do that until you see that he's willing to go for like the reaction stuff. That's my take on it.
Yeah.
Does so I want to bring up the Hungrybox Axe sets before we move on to talking about Axe. Are
So
we
before we do Hbox X, just last point on Hbox Plup, I feel like my litmus test nowadays for how Fox is doing against Hungrybox in particular is when he does those sort of like he's cornered you and then he does those sort of retreating or like staying in place back airs. If you're running into those repeatedly over and over again, you just sort of tilt and lose right away. And I found that Plup in winners finals was run up shielding those and getting out of the
Yes.
corner that way. Whereas in
Mhm.
Grants, he just kept getting hit over and over, and he sort of seemed like he was just visibly tilting on stage.
Hungrybox also started to do a better read on when Plup was shielding. Like there were a couple times where like Plup came down with an aerial into shield, and instead of Hungrybox just immediately trying to like punish the aerial on shield, he just wave dash out and then dash back and grabbed him
Right.
instead.
Mm.
Like Plup,
Oh, Sheridan,
Hungrybox did a better job when Plup was what?
Losing
are
you.
you? We're
Oh.
losing you a bit.
Sorry, I was just saying, Hungrybox did a better job of understanding when Plup was shielding, and Plup was also not realizing when he could just run away right after his aerials instead of shielding.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I would agree with both of those. I think PracticalTAS, like your point about whether the opponent runs into your back airs in the corner, like I feel like that's true about other matchups too, not just Fox. Because I know personally, when I feel like I'm playing well against Puff, I don't get hit by those back airs. But then, when sets start to go badly, like all of my sets recently against Sheridan that I've played in the last 3 years, I just like run into like 4 backers in a row, and I'm like, wow, why am I so stupid?
It's just so scary sometimes against Hbox as a spacey though, because I know it's not like a legit thing, but of course, if you're shielding a lot and you're expecting him to back air your shield and fade away, or you're trying to call out what he does afterwards, just a second of holding shield too long, and he's gonna land in front of you and just grab you. And as a Fox player, that's just so terrifying. But
It's
the risk
brutal.
reward is so in his favor.
Yeah, but you can kind of train yourself to set off like a little alarm clock to say like, okay, Puff hasn't hit my shield yet. That means I should do something else here instead of continuing to shield. And that's a pretty hard thing to do in general, like for most matchups, but Puff like doing a tomahawk is actually a little slower than most other characters. So it's definitely something that's feasible for Fox to learn how to do.
Do you think it's
Mango used
reactable?
to be
Because it's like that
yeah.
whole thing, like Tomahawk doesn't like tomahawking on someone's shield, like doesn't have frame data, but it's
You don't even have to react to the tomahawk. You can react to an aerial didn't come out at this point.
Yeah. This kind of reminds me of some stuff that happens in other fighting games where you'll have a mix-up where the opponent can either do like a low or an overhead, for example. But if they just do sort of those two things at the most natural timing, then the overhead will come out later than the low, so you can block low, and then after nothing has happened, block high, and then in that way cover both of those options. So I think it's definitely possible in Melee, to get around those sort of empty land grab mix-ups to use that timing to your advantage. But then the counter to that, of course, is to switch up your timing for the aerial or whatever, so that both of those things actually happen at the same time. And then it's just a matter of, can your opponent react fast enough to the option that you're going to do, and can you disguise your option for as long as possible to make it so that they have to just guess.
Exactly. So like the best counter that Puff has to Fox reading that is to do the absolute latest possible aerial, because at that point you might think you're thinking that Fox is thinking there's going to be a tomahawk, so I'm going to drop my shield and do something else. But instead that aerial comes out.
All right. Edwin, you wanted to move us along?
Yeah, no, we've just been talking about GOML.
Hungrybox
But it's a really
edge
awesome
guarding was
discussion on it.
incredibly good again.
Yeah.
What does Axe need to do against Hbox? I don't know at this point. It feels like that MLG Anaheim set just means less and less as time goes by, and I frankly have no clue whether it's an Axe problem of him just like going in too much or taking too many risks, or if it's an actual just block that the character has against Puff. I've heard different things from PvP players.
I think it's a bad matchup because as Puff, when you're playing against Pikachu, you're basically playing against a fox that doesn't have lasers, that has a arguably worse neutral air, and that you basically just running around and trying to neutral air you and up smash you.
And doesn't like confirm off grab.
Exactly. Nothing.
Oh, it's so painful.
Nothing off grab.
If only Pikachu could combo off down throw against.
Yeah, the match would be a lot different.
Yeah. By the way, in case you guys are not familiar with the stats, since MLJ Anaheim, when Axe defeated Hungrybox in top 8, they have played 14 times. Hungrybox has won every single set. The closest.
How many games has Axe taken?
Axe has won. I'm looking at Tafo stats.
Well, at CO or something last year, I think Axe took him to game 5 because he lost the first 2 games as Pikachu, then he won the next 2 as Young Link, and the last game went to last stock or something like that.
Yeah, Axe has taken him to game 5 twice actually, at CEO and Super Smash Con. And so yeah, CEO were both Young Link. I believe at Smash Con the character, it was Pikachu twice. I don't remember exactly. So yeah, I don't know. It's hard to say. Like if you look at every stage, he has a losing record on every stage. Falco, Pikachu, Young Link has a losing record with every character.
Like what does he have to do? Because it feels like it's both an Axe, like Axe just getting better played, but also that just like no matter what character he brings out, it's just gonna put him in a losing situation.
Marth, Ices, Yoshi. I don't know, man.
Now his ICs will get destroyed.
Yeah.
Maybe he just needs to develop a fox.
Yeah, maybe.
Is that not beyond him?
I think the better question is whether Axe at MLG Anaheim versus Hungrybox is the same as aMSa at Smash Summit 6 versus Hungrybox. Whether aMSa can repeat his success or not.
It's funny how like people remember every time this like somebody took a set off of Hungrybox
as not
like like, oh, Lucky beat him once like 3 years ago. Fly Amanita beat him like 6 years ago. Are we going to see that again? And that's like how it's like people always use those to set up like the Hungrybox sets.
Yeah, like Professor Pro beat Hungrybox. Can he upset him?
Kirby Kaze, the Puff Slayer.
How many did SFAT take?
SFAT
beat him at Shine 2016.
Yeah. Is that only one?
He beat him at the Big House.
I can look it up.
And he beat him at CO Dreamland.
Oh.
Yeah, CO Dreamland, Shine 2016, and the Big House 6.
Yep, you got all of them, Edwin.
And I think he might have one in Florida at Smash Conference, but I forget.
That
No,
is
'cause-
not listed.
Locals don't
He's-
count.
It's like a regional with he lost a game to Cyrox at that same tournament, I think. But I forget if he lost to SFAT there or not.
Yeah, they
But
played
his record is
15
still very positive.
Yes. There are 15 other sets listed in Tapo stats. I'm sure there are others that they played.
So what's the
Hbox?
verdict on Axe versus Hbox? Does he just have no shot at being? Because like I feel like when it comes to like your viability of winning a major, like just as a player, let alone a character, we'll look back. I've looked back like over the last 15-ish years, longer than that. Axe is probably the best player that's never won a national.
Mhm.
And I just think, and I feel like, especially in today's metagame, if there's one person that you just cannot beat, then that really
you have
hurts
to
your
either be
chances
able to
of
be
making considered a contender or dark horse to win, especially when
Yeah.
that person is a presence in every top 8.
it's Hungrybox and Armada. If you cannot beat either one of those,
Yeah.
like your road to grand finals will go through one, perhaps both of them.
Yeah. I think the closest we've seen to somebody sort of, I don't know, you could say lucking into a tournament victory is probably maybe like SFAT at the first Shine, you could say, where he
Yeah.
beat Mango, and that was enough to sort of get him into grand finals against Mewtwo King, where he got destroyed. So, or like, obviously Wobbles at Evo, we can talk about it again, but
But he
Mango
did
was
go through
playing too good on that day.
Hungrybox there.
Yeah,
Right, exactly.
Wobbles went through Hbox
Yeah.
and PB. And
Yeah,
Mango.
so that's sort of
But
the
at best of
one
three.
exception. Or because he was able to beat Hungrybox, that means he was able to have his shot at the title.
Maybe Axe needs to develop a Puff himself. Learn from Tuesday and Puff ditto Hbox.
Well,
Ooh.
how much has he really explored the Young Link, like in that matchup? Like, has he made a dedicated effort on there? Because like his style of Young Link is much different than Armada's.
Yes.
Yeah, it's like the play at close ranges, nair, overshoot.
He plays Young Link like he plays Pikachu, which I don't think is the right play against Hungrybox.
Yeah, that's a
Even,
good point.
but even if you want to say that, like, how good is?
He could modify it.
Sorry, go on, Sheridan.
That's true.
I mean, he could change his game up. Like, I don't think it would be too much to ask of him to try to incorporate like some of Armada's strats in there. Like what works for him and what works for Armada. You put those together, you might have something.
Yeah. Sorry, guys, I gotta dip out for a second. I'll be right back.
Sure. Yeah, I guess Sheridan. My only thing with that is that Hbox has or not a decade, but he has like 5 years of having practiced against that same play style. Like I feel like it's already such an uphill battle if he were to go down that route.
I mean, it's long enough ago that there might be some, decay there.
Maybe.
Maybe Axe and Zain need to team up and learn how to counter Puff with Marth.
Well, that I didn't want to say that as like the Marth fanatic here, but I feel like that might be his best shot at this point, right? His PG's not gonna do it. Like his Young Link Falco. I mean, probably not his Young Link. Forget about his Falco. I think his Ice Climbers would get destroyed. Like it would not be pretty.
Let's just go down Blur's tier list.
Does Axe have a? Does he? I'm trying to think of like some weird characters that Puff. Sheridan, what are some bizarre matchups for Puff? Like, is Luigi Puff? Like, can you gimmick a victory as Luigi?
It is a little weird, but I think like Hungrybox will be able to reduce like the dimensionality of that matchup in order to win. Like a good Luigi can definitely catch Puff off guard, but there's just like a few things you have to focus on and like not let Luigi play the game that he wants to make it not winnable for Luigi.
Okay,
So
guys,
you might be able to take a game, but a set, especially best of 5, I don't see it.
I have the solution. Axe needs to go random against Hungrybox. He needs to rotate through all of his characters that he has in a random order each set, taking one game at a time until he gets 3 out of 5.
I feel like all his characters
Oh, Edwin, you
Fox
cut
could
out.
be in a chamber for like a month and not play Melee and come out of that chamber and still beat all of his characters. I'm sorry, Axe. But
Dude, that reminds me of Mewtwo King versus Chu at Zenith 2012, where they played in
oh,
winners
that's one of my
finals.
favorite sets.
Yeah, Mewtwo King won. I forget exactly what the order was, but he won one game as Fox and then lost. One game as Sheik and then lost, and then won the last game with Marth. It was something like that. I don't remember the order.
He won the last game with Sheik.
Okay, yeah, but he like literally switched between all of his characters and beat Chu once with each of them.
His pop off at the end of that set is incredible. You would have thought that he would have won a national at the end of that set. And it's funny because nobody remembers that pop off because they only remember PP winning the tournament and going off against the crowd or whatever.
Poor Mewtwo King.
Yeah.
Really, that's all
You know,
that
it's kind of similar to like Mewtwo King's viability of winning a major for so long seemed hampered by his inability to beat Armada, which is now like changed. So it's kind of similar with Axe, I guess, with Armada in the past and definitely now with Hungrybox. So like, where do you guys see his legacy? Is he always going to be like the Chicago Cub pre-2016 Cubs? Will he do it at some point? I don't know.
I feel
He's
like
always
it's
been so close.
Yeah, I feel like it depends a lot on sort of whether he. Well, I don't want to say it depends on like his mentality and whether he wants to put in the work, because it's clear that he's been in the scene for such a long time. It's clear he cares
he's
about
an
the
amazing
game
player.
and he cares about his performance and all that. But I don't know. It's like, in what world does Axe win a super major in the next couple of years? Like, what has to happen?
I think assuming he gets to round 32, he would probably have to play against like a top 30 level Fox to get into quarters. And then in quarters, like I'm gonna assume we give him like the 8 or 9 seed. He plays. Oh god, the thing is like it just ends up with him running into Hbox. Like no matter what. Like,
he has to avoid Hbox. Like that's just a given. That's just like the reality that we see from history. But he has a shot against anybody else.
If Leffen got the 2 seed, like what if he got like Leffen into Mewtwo King into Mango winners finals?
Yeah, it's like that's definitely possible.
Right.
But the question is like, in what percentage of brackets with all those players is that going to happen? Like,
Yeah, and even then, even if he gets that,
he has to
bracket,
win them.
it's still
not just get the
at
right
best coin flips. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's like, it's almost more likely that like Armada DQs out of the tournament and he happens to be on that side of the bracket, right? Like,
it's more likely that Armada DQ, like just based on results, it's more likely that Armada DQs than Axe even gets second at a national.
Oh my god.
Think
Don't
about
say
how
it like
crazy
that,
that
man.
is. It is more likely that Armada would drop out of a tournament than Axe would get second at a national, just because his matchup spread is it's such a mountain for him to climb.
Yeah. What did you guys put Axe in the ultimate SSBMI?
Pika and I thought he was 15 easy because we took a look at his major performances and we took a look at like how long he had maintained this level for. And I wrote about this in my weekly recap if you guys read it, but basically it was like a fun, silly column I wrote about why Axe is actually the protagonist of Melee from the Pro era onward.
Yeah.
Sheridan, do you know what I'm talking about?
I do know that, but I only caught a bit of it before the show.
The premise was that like the premise is basically that he's defined a lot of what makes modern Melee exciting and all like the different changes in it. So like along with representing a classically seen as unviable character, he's one of the first shield droppers, which is now like one of the really big techniques. He has really like lightning fast reactions and like amazing tech skill, which is basically a trademark that's needed to be really good. And obviously like this is all confirmation bias, like psychoanalytical BS. but I do think it's a really fun story to look at because he's always been
Sure.
just really close to like entering Melee's Mount Olympus. And like there's no one in Melee history who has been as good for as long as he's been without even second at a national, you know? Like he's just
Yeah. So on that note, I guess there's sort of a sad protagonist that you can talk about, which is Ash from Pokemon the anime, because Ash always makes it to the Indigo League and he always loses. Right?
That's so messed up, dude. That's such a
and-
messed up thematic
was-
parallel.
And like
I was
of
gonna
all
bring
the
that up, damn
animes,
it!
like which one is the most appropriate for a Pikachu main? I mean, it's like,
That's so depressing, dude. It's thematically consistent as well. Oh no.
On a lighter note, I put Axe and aMSa and I guess and Armada and I guess to a lesser extent Hungrybox in the same sort of tier in the history of Melee, where it's like they are literally the reason why their character is where it is on the tier list. And
Mhm.
so, like, if we didn't have Axe, where is Pikachu as a character as a whole?
yeah.
And I feel like the people who literally single-handedly drag their character up the tier list like that through just sheer willpower deserve to be far better than wherever Edwin put aMSa on the top 100 players.
Oh, here we go.
I think the putting aMSa at 64 on the top 100 ever looks way worse in hindsight because aMSa this year has had so many top 8 performances. By the criteria we set for the list, which is based around like consistency at majors, it seemed fine at the time for him to be there. But given that he's made like 3 or 4 more major top 8s, like for the span of a whole, even for the span of a whole career, 3 or 4 is a lot of top 8s, and that's just within the span of months. So like putting him below even like Swedish Delight at this point looks a lot worse in hindsight than it was at the time.
Even though it was
No
still
offense to
pretty
Swedish
bad
Delight.
at the time. But we've
All
already
right.
had this conversation in private.
We've got over this.
We've gone over this many times.
Yeah. One thing with
Kotaku-
the axe that I also think is kind of cool, just as like as an aside, he has the 6th most top 8 appearances out of any player in Melee history. Only Mutaking, Hungrybox, I forget the order, but Mutaking, Hungrybox, Armada, Mango, and Chudat have more top 8 appearances than Axe. Which is
where's Ken in that?
He's surprisingly low, but the thing is, like, he has all the first places.
Yeah, because he has yeah.
Or not all the first places, but he's up there. Oh,
Uh-huh.
fun aside, and this is the only thing I'll say about Hbox or the GOML segment. Based on our criteria for what qualifies as a super major for the Smash history, the top 100 rankings, Hbox is actually one under Mango for all-time first places right now with 22. So I guess another debate that we'll probably have to go into in a future podcast is, when does Hbox overtake Mango for number 2 ever?
Mm.
Probably needs at least one more Evo.
Probably like if he finishes this year's number 1, like he has a case, right?
He's starting to have a case. Absolutely, he's starting to have a case.
I think it depends. I think it seems like an inevitable reality that Hbox will pass Mango.
I think.
Yeah.
Well, I think the length of time of dominance
Yeah.
matters a lot too, because like Mango was dominant for like a longer time period, at least at number 1, than Hungrybox has been so far. On the other hand, there have been way more tournaments
Yeah,
in the last like 2 years.
Yeah.
So
like Mango being the best from Pound 3 to like revival of Melee 2, like that stretch is really impressive, but it's definitely not as impressive in terms of sheer tournaments won from as like
one was ROM 2.
ROM 2 was late 2009.
Oh, well, I was thinking all the way. Well, Armada was the best for maybe from then until 2012, and then I think you could argue Mango took it until maybe Evo 2014.
Yeah, I think 2013 to like Big House 4 are the really great years
House
for
4. Yeah.
No, since I'm this is sort of an aside, but since I'm on a podcast with a bunch of other Melee nerds, I have a quick question that I'm too lazy to Google. What's the biggest tournament that axe was in winners finals at?
Sandstorm, I think. Probably Sandstorm, right?
Oh, that was quick. I have no
That was
idea.
in front of his AZ crowd.
Yeah.
The home court advantage. That would make sense.
His performance at Sandstorm when he got third was overshadowed by Wes getting second,
Right.
and also overshadowed by Mac D cutting the lights out. Wink, wink.
Literally.
I'm trying to think of like another thing about. I don't know. I don't have anything else to say about Axe, but if you guys want to talk Hbox versus Mango, I'm cool with that. Otherwise, we can move on.
Yeah. Let's talk about that some other time.
All right, are you guys ready for the Melee Stats speed round?
Oh, are we doing that now?
Yeah.
I think we've run out of topics for me to have any input on.
Oh, wait. Should I go into my moderately obscure analogy about PTAS that I was talking about earlier?
Oh yeah, go for it.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Well, okay. So before I say that, how many of you guys know anything about Hearthstone?
I don't
I
know
know.
shit about Hearthstone.
I do.
Sadly.
PTAS, you do not.
I
No.
do.
Okay. I'm debating whether I should. All right. So 2 out of 4.
Go for
All
it.
right.
Yeah, go
so
for it.
I'll ask for a clarification from my Hearthstone playing friends later.
okay. So are you guys familiar with DisguisedToast?
Yeah.
Okay, so DisguisedToast is a content creator in the Hearthstone community. And he started out as just a guy who made videos about like funny interactions in the game, as well as like lore videos, like, you know, who are the characters behind these cards and stuff like that. And so initially it was just sort of like video and art and text and just sort of informational stuff. But his videos started to get pretty popular. He started to do like voiceovers and stuff like that. And then, you know, one day he famously shows up to a fireside gathering, which is like a local event, and he wins the whole thing. And while he's winning on stream, he's wearing this mask, which is like a piece of bread with sunglasses over it, which was his logo at the time. And so he turns into this sort of like icon of the Hearthstone community. And then he starts streaming, but he always streams with the mask, so like theoretically nobody knows what he looks like. I think one day he accidentally, you know, shows his face on the stream. He like tilts his webcam or something accidentally, and so there's like now clips of him out on the internet with his actual face. People generally don't care that much, but like from time to time, somebody will be like, "Hey, if you don't, you know, give me $100, I'll show this video to everybody." Like for a while, nobody really cares about that, but eventually he's like, one guy like spammed a bunch of subreddits with this clip over and over, and he ends up on live stream fails. And then like he's like, all right, you know what, at this point, whatever, I'm just gonna kind of reveal myself and show my face and just stream without the mask from now on. And so now he's like one of the most popular Hearthstone streamers in the world. He gets to visit Blizzard HQ, and like he gets to reveal new cards from new expansions and stuff like that. But he still, you know, occasionally makes those videos about, you know, weird interactions with cards and stuff like that. And so the reason I bring this up is I kind of feel like PracticalTAS is, in some ways, the DisguisedToast of the Melee community. And
Can see it.
The appearance at GOML is sort of where I think it'll be interesting to see where your story goes from here and like how it diverges.
Did you show your face?
Oh, no.
No, not a GOML. Yeah, I was just voicing over replays.
Okay.
So maybe this is your big moment. So like, you know, not to like, you know, circle jerk too hard, but I think there is a place for people like PracticalTAS in the esports community. There's always those people who are like kind of, you know, nerds about the game. You're sort of, maybe Drug Fox is another example of somebody like that who just enjoys the game a lot and always wants to hear about all of the crazy things that you can do inside the game. And so, you know, nowadays it is true that some people don't like DisguisedToast that much because there's sort of been a bit of content saturation with his stream and his videos and stuff like that. So I guess I didn't really have sort of a closing thesis or
this
anything
leads
like
into
that.
what we were going to talk about in the last part, the idea of like Smash content creation, like the state of where content is right now. So
Yeah.
do you guys want to talk about it right now, or do you wait until?
I think if PTAS wants to dip out, I think
No, I'm good to stay if you guys want. I'm down to stay. But the funny thing is, actually, my actual face reveal was, I think, on a YouTube video that I did a while ago, ranting about the Smash Summit, I think 4 voting system and how crazy it got. And the funny part is, like, literally, as with DisguisedToast, literally nobody cared that I had shown my face. And I streamed a couple times, and literally nobody cared that I showed my face. And now I went on GOML, 30,000 people heard my voice, and nobody saw my face. So it's almost like I still haven't fully revealed yet.
So PTAS, before we go on to the, or before you bow out or whatever, can you give us a good "it's true" for like?
I mean, you can look at the.
I'm not looking at the clip. I want to hear the live rendition.
I feel like that's the peak of it, but like, it's true.
Nice.
All right.
I'm ready for this meme to be over.
And that I literally only did because GOML is vanilla. And
Yeah.
I was thinking about making a joke about UCF and Phantoms during GOML, but then I was like, A, this is a Nintendo sponsored stream, and I don't know if I want to do that. And B, GOML is vanilla, so the obvious joke there is to say that it's true. So
Yeah.
Very subtle.
very, very subtle.
I like the approach there. All right. Well,
And,
thanks for coming on, PTAS.
All right, thanks guys for having me. Shout outs to Melee Stats, obviously. Shout outs to Toronto Joe for giving me that shot at GOML. He's the absolute homie. Shout outs to EMG, Media XP, everybody that's known me since before I was PracticalTAS. Shout outs to Smashboards, and shout outs to Melee for being sick. Have a good night, guys.
Shout out to me.
Thanks, Captain.
Yeah.
See ya.
Yeah, I forgot the overlay was gonna change as soon as he left, so all that pre-prep I did is all out the window. So you guys can talk. Actually, you can do the speed round with those two while I set everything back up.
All right. Yeah, that sounds good. All right. We got NorCal versus NorCal going on here. Sheridan versus YCZ6. We have Melee Stats versus Myom here. So.
Oh my god.
So I'm gonna tell you guys basically the gist of this segment. So I'm gonna give you a question, and you have 1 minute to answer it. But each of you get 30 seconds. That's how I've split the time here. Okay. So like, if I ask you a question, like say, what character should Mutaking go next? YCZ or Leon will say Mutaking should go X, and he has 30 seconds. Then I will stop him, and then Sheridan will give his 30 seconds. And then we move on to the next question. So for this segment, I actually have 6 questions because I thought Save was going to be on the. I thought Save was.
Well,
gonna be on
I
the
can
segment.
still be a part of it. I can multitask. Oh.
20 seconds per person.
I do want to say I did not do debate or anything like that in high school or college. Sheridan, did you?
No.
You guys watch
Perfect.
I
Around the
have
Horn?
years of posting on the internet.
That's all you
True.
need.
That's basically like a PhD. What about watching
Not
Around the
true.
Horn or Pardon the Interruption?
Yeah,
I've watched some of those.
Yeah.
Yeah, consider this kind of like that. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna ask a question since Save is part of this now, like I had planned it. I'm gonna say one of your names, and then you have 20 seconds to give your answer. Okay?
All right.
You have to give your answer and explain it. We start very soon. Are you guys ready?
I'm ready.
I'm ready.
As heck.
This is the peak of intellectual Melee debate. I wish we had like music or something in the back. But for now, we just have my stopwatch. Okay. Ready? Okay. Okay, ready, set, go. If you are Axe, would you rather play Armada or Hungry Bra in bracket? Save, go.
Armada, didn't he take a game off him at EVO last year? I think that's a lot easier thing for him to win. I think he can more easily beat Armada than he can beat Hungrybox. Is that my 20 seconds? How much more time do I have?
Okay, Leon, go.
As X, I would rather play aMSa because if I'm not going to win the set either way, I think aMSa gives me more chances to do cool stuff, make gifs of myself appear on Reddit. I'm done.
20 seconds is so long. You don't realize it until
All
you're
right, Sheridan, you
forced.
go.
I would rather play Hungrybox because I think there's unexplored potential for a young Link with a different style to try to see what he can do and incorporate maybe some of aMSa's technology as well without being so campy and without suffering
Okay,
from the
we're
drawbacks
moving
of
on
that
to the
style.
next round. True or false? Failing to adhere to basic personal hygiene practices is DQ worthy. Sheridan, go.
It is absolutely DQ worthy. You are affecting the experience of the other attendees, and my only qualm is that I don't have an objective way to assess this. And
Okay, Leon, go.
I agree with Sheridan. I think if you wanted an objective measure, you can look at whether other people are complaining about that person. And in order to do this, you probably need to make it more acceptable to do that kind of complaining to the TO. But I think the answer is yes.
And save.
Not at
Your
all.
turn.
If you're not able to accomplish your tech skill with someone smelling next to you, you don't deserve the win. If the smell gets them the win, they deserve that W. Whatever gets the win, gets the win. No DQ.
I also want to, one thing I want to add to this though is there were complaints about people smelling in the Flatiron venue. That venue was hot as balls. There was no ventilation.
Okay, we're gonna move on to the next
Very
segment. I already so this is Mutating Fox and Crushes Fox enter 10 super majors. Who on average does better? Leon, go.
I think Mewtwo King is overall a better player. I think if he plays the same character repeatedly at multiple super majors, he will gain the experience he needs to outplace Crush overall.
Okay, Sheridan, go.
I think that Mewtwo King will do better, even though accounting for the fact that he will on average be receiving a higher seeding and therefore like being expected to do better, having like
so smart.
Yeah. So if you account for seeding, Mewtwo King's got it anyway. But I think I agree with Leon that or I agree with whoever it was that said he would still win regardless.
Okay, Save, you have 10 seconds. Go.
Fox is good. He will win. Mewtwo's a good player. There's not much else to say.
He didn't even give an answer.
Okay, fill in the blank with one word. The biggest challenge for Melee in 2018 is blank.
Staying awake
sorry.
Staying awake through grand finals with Hungrybox. Oh
Okay,
wait, one
that's
word.
Save's answer.
Oh, that was
Yeah, okay,
wait, what do you
staying
mean
is
one
your
word?
word. So
Fuck.
what is Leon's?
So I have 20 seconds to think, right? Because it's only one word.
Damn it. Choked.
You could give one word in your explanation. You already have like only 10 seconds left.
E-sport.
Okay.
I'm done.
Alright, Sheridan, your turn.
Finances.
That's a better answer.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
We still have 15 seconds.
You can stop the clock early. You're running this.
Yeah.
No, I have to. We're already in this deep.
All right.
Okay, I'm gonna move on to the next one in 3, 2, 1. Who is aMSa's hardest opponent in bracket right now? Sheridan, go.
Hungrybox. Hungrybox is the #1 dude. It's just a matter of aMSa like actually just doing it with foxes and trying to learn from other foxes that have beaten him.
Okay, Save, go.
Mewtwo King, because Mewtwo King's beat him the last 2 times. He beat Hungrybox. Like, it going full recency bias. Like, I think that's probably his biggest threat.
Leon?
Okay.
I agree with Hungrybox. I think before aMSa beat him at Summit, he had won the last 5 sets that they had between them. The record is just not good, and an on-form, warmed-up, crunched Hungrybox is very difficult.
All right, and the final one. The final one.
Oh, boy.
In a Sheridan versus Juggle Guy best of 5 money match, what is the outcome? Leon, start.
Best of 5?
Yeah.
Sheridan 3-0. I think he's a much better player. He was ranked in NorCal. NorCal is better than Michigan. That's all I have to say.
A Save?
I don't know about much of either of their histories as players, but because Sheridan is our guest, I give it to Sheridan 3-1. I'll give Juggle Guy a game.
All right, and Sheridan, close it off.
Juggle Guy gets a game because it's a best of 5, so he gets his best counter pick. But Falcon is a good matchup for me. Even though I'm pretty washed lately, I still think I think I can take that.
All right, I'm just going to stop the segment right here. So, that was a little sloppy, but now I'm going to tell you guys how each of you did. If you are Axe, would you rather
what
play...
a joy.
Defending champ.
Would you rather play... I should actually time myself during
I didn't
these
realize that we were getting immediate feedback.
No, you would. So, if you are
Okay.
Axe, would you rather play Armada or Hbox and Bracket? Sheridan, I found your optimism especially nice in this segment, especially as the Puff player. You explained your process very well and had already established your credibility. So I thought you did a really good job in this segment, and I generally liked it. So Sheridan gets the point there. For the true or false, failing personal hygiene being DQ worthy, I like the anarchy that Save brought to the table. And ultimately, I decided that the anarchy and chaos that he used as his justification of sort of like everybody out for themselves, I found it much more appealing than Sheridan's credibility as a tournament organizer, which is great. But the threat of anarchy was really enough to give Save the points here. For Mute King's Fox and Crush's Fox entering 10 Super Majors, honestly, you guys had much more boring answers for this than I thought you would, so nobody gets points here. Fill in the blank with one word. The biggest challenge for Melee in 2018 is finances, which was Sheridan's answer, which I really liked because it actually made a lot of sense. What is Armada's hardest opponent in bracket right now? Honestly, I was kind of surprised 2 people said Hbox. I thought this would be a much tougher question. I thought like Leon would say Mango or something, but I liked Leon's justification for picking Hungrybox. So Leon wins this round. And in the Sheridan versus Juggle Guy best of 5, what is the outcome? I liked Leon just straight up saying that Sheridan was just a straight up better player and throwing a dig in against Michigan, which I really liked. So I'm going to give Leon the points there. So this ended up being 2 points to Sheridan, 2 points to Leon, and 1 point to Save.
Nice.
And now the tiebreaker
no.
is that I share the same hoodie that Leon has. So,
Yay,
Leon,
let's go.
congratulations. You have won the 2nd edition of the Melee Stats Speed Round.
You
Yeah,
didn't
let's go,
prep a
Shine. Fuck
tiebreaker
genocide.
question?
No, I didn't.
That's weak, Edwin.
But what I did prepare was Leon would now get his 30 seconds of fame to say whatever he wants in around the horn fashion. So
shit, what the fuck?
we're going to start
That's
going
more of a
right
punishment than a...
now. We're going to start going right now. 30 seconds. Go.
All right. Follow me on Twitter. I've been releasing a lot of videos recently, and they've been doing really well. We're going to talk about content later, but I just want to say, the sort of medium of Twitter is really interesting because it lets you sort of publicize your stuff to a wider audience sort of automatically. It's more viral than YouTube, so I think
I really liked your latest one, the forward air edge guard, and then just getting carried away and doing all sorts of these.
Yeah, I love that one too.
Shots.
Yeah, that is, by the way, the story that I described in that tweet is actually what happened. It was like, all right, I have this cool tweet with a bunch of funny stuff with Falcon. I'm gonna sit down and actually lab stuff out. And then I was like, what if I did reverse back air here? And then it kind of just spiraled out of control from there.
I love the one where you were trying to figure out how to edgeguard Marth, I think, but you ended up just up airing the battlefield, underneath battlefield, and just doing a bunch of crazy shit around that.
Yeah. Grapple wall jump, good stuff. By the way, I only BN Michigan because I knew it would get me points with Edwin. Literally, like every Michigan player I've played, every ranked Michigan player played in tournament has beaten me in the last like 8 years. Going back to like Juggle Guy like 3-stalking me at Apex 2012. So
I could just imagine.
So you shit talked a region that just been beating you.
I mean,
that's
it brings the hype, man. That's me.
I'm not. So definitely the audacity to do that is something that I admire. the same way that I admired Save's chaotic take on personal hygiene at Smash events.
It's too easy to just take the obvious answer. It's more fun that way.
Yeah, you gotta get inside Edwin's mind to win the segment.
No,
that's
you just
not
have to
worth
give
the
most
points.
reasonable answers. All right, so I actually think your 30-second monologue worked well into the talking about the future of content. So the first thing I wanted to bring up, especially because Sheridan's here, and Sheridan, I know you're a data science guy, right? Like that is your.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So something I wanted to ask you about is like, what is the potential of like melee stats, like not the stats in the future? Because right now, like
we know
it feels like we're kind of limited to like wins and losses, and that's such a binary way of looking at.
Yeah, I mean, the first step is always getting adequate data collection in the first place. And that's where we can stand to improve the most. I think we have a lot of people that want to do things with the game, with the stats of the game. It's just a matter of getting the actual pieces for them to work with. If you remember, Jazz, Fizzy had his project called
Fizzy had
Flippy.
for Smash Rivalries, he had that great set of neutral game wins, wins per stock and stuff like that.
So off and on, he's been working on that, and I've always wanted to see like what I could do or what anybody could do with some of the things that are tracked in that. So I just look forward to that progressing to the point where like it can be released to the public, and that anybody can take like interesting analysis ideas and just get the data to play with it.
Sheridan, something I wanted to run by you is, was there any thought of ever doing expected value or expected stock differential across a set for different matchups, and then measuring expected value or expected stock differential and comparing that to the actual stock differential in a set?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different metrics you can use. I think I like expected stock differential and value. Like, it's a little tricky because people don't play the same way throughout the set. And there's also like when somebody is stocking somebody, like that stock doesn't matter. So there's a lot of tricky elements to that, but I think that's like a very useful measure. Once we figure out like what the right way to actually put into words and quantify it is, especially because I think that one thing we've seen from a lot of professional sports is that just using wins versus losses is fine, but if you look at margin of victory, that actually tells more of a story. Yeah, it tells more of a story than just wins and losses, which is
absolutely,
the people that like to say a win is a win, like that really only applies to just whether you're moving on in the bracket or not. It doesn't apply to being able to predict results from your past results.
Yeah.
I think that's true. Like barring there being a massive history of something happening over and over again. That's why I feel like in Melee, I try not to get caught up in trends even over the course of like 3 months or 4 months, because Melee is such a game contingent on so many variables that anyone can have a hot hand or suddenly go cold. Like look at Chudat, right? Like did he get worse, or did he just run into hard opponents? Or sorry,
yeah,
I'm not calling your video
always...
out here.
No, you're good. Yeah, no.
I'm saying like it's a tricky topic to evaluate from a data standpoint.
That's
I
always
think it's interesting.
You go ahead, Leon.
Okay, sure. I thought it was interesting you used the term hot hand because there was a famous study in basketball.
Yeah, hot hand is actually a thing.
Yeah.
Well, no, where it's not a thing.
Yeah, it's not a thing.
Wait, what?
Yeah, it's not a thing.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah,
that's crazy.
So,
there was one a while ago that said, okay, whatever.
Fake news.
So I think what it was is there was an article, I forget where it was, but they said that they found, as a follow-up to that study, they found that when a player is hot, their teammates do better because the opposing team focuses more on the player that's doing well, and that causes them to be able to contribute more to their team. But I guess from a Melee perspective, I'm interested because commentators always talk about momentum, right? And so it would be interesting to see if there's statistics on momentum within a game or across games within a set. Like, how much does that kind of stuff actually matter? I can imagine it being hard because of the way counterpicks work in Melee. There's sort of naturally a kind of reverse momentum between matches of a set, but yeah, those are the kind of statistics that would be interesting to see, stuff that can kind of deepen our understanding of how Melee and how tournament.
Something in that similar vein, but not exactly kind of the hot hand, like a commonly accepted thing, like people like a wives' tale that hot hand's a thing. I've actually been doing a bunch of research the last couple of days on trying to find out if the summit level up is actually a thing. So the hardest part about it has been valuing performances. Even though I'm not a fan of the ELO system, what I've been using to value performances is
it's just ELO, right?
Yeah, it's a modified version of the ELO formula where like losses are calculated less and wins matter more, and it takes into account the rank for the most recent ranking period is used to determine that. And interesting enough, surprisingly, what I've seen so far is that it's a very minor difference in performances, and like it's 5 majors before and after their summit, and it's a very, very minor difference in performance in those things. So that I'm not like 100% ready to give the conclusion, and I haven't put in all the data yet. But after putting in 4 summits worth of data, there's like 5 or 6 players who've gotten worse after summit, and the ones who do, it's usually a very, very minor increment.
Interesting.
Yeah, just to kind of preview my video for Thursday and kind of add on to something like that. I bet a lot more people would be doing this or would have gotten into this earlier, because just putting all that data in is taking like 10, 15, 20 hours, just putting it in. Like I haven't even had to get into the analysis. But if I wanted to do a project maybe not similar to that for like baseball, I have baseballreference.com and I can look at the last like 40 years of data without having to do any more work, which is something that'd be awesome. And with TAFO stats, it's already like a huge help of getting some of that data, but we still need some way to like the barrier of entry of getting that first step done is so hard.
I have a sort of a hypothetical question, which maybe is impossible to answer, but I'll ask it anyway. So, are you guys all familiar with Moneyball, like the book and sort of the phenomenon? Yeah. So Moneyball, in case anybody isn't aware, so Moneyball was this book which came out, which was about the Oakland A's and specifically Billy Beane, their manager. And he worked with people that did statistics and I guess proto data science in the baseball scene back in the early 2000s, I believe. Was it before that? I forget. But anyway,
I think that's right.
Yeah, and so the Oakland A's were able to have one of the best regular seasons of all time, despite having one of the lowest budgets in payrolls in the entire league. And a big part of that was that they were able to determine what statistics about players were actually important and which one people just thought were important but actually didn't have much of an effect on their overall ranking, right? So stuff like batting average, for example, and RBIs are overrated, but stuff like walk and whip and stuff like that were underrated. So my question is, if we do see busy stats or whatever incarnation of that take off, what do you think will be the things that are currently overrated or underrated in people's gameplay?
I do think, like Sheridan was saying before, even though it'd be hard to get exactly like stocks remaining, like because it's really hard to define how hard of a victory, quote unquote, someone has. And I think of statistics I can think of like off the top of my head, I think stocks remaining would potentially be good to show how hard of a victory someone has on someone. It could like showing the difference between a close 3-0 and like a triple 3 stock 3-0.
I think neutral game wins is kind of, or the percentage of neutral interactions win is slowly becoming more and more obsolete because the line between like the line between winning a neutral interaction or an opponent messing up or guessing wrong on like on a pseudo punish game interaction, it feels a little more blurred in the way that the metagame direction is going. So like I feel like, well, like in like neutral game interactions are gonna matter a lot less, and like the offstage game is gonna matter a lot more moving forward.
I think that is true. I think it's a little hard to say though, because it's hard to define like neutral game sort of rigorously. So it's hard to say whether that's actually, if that does happen, it'll be hard to say whether it's actually overrated or if we just don't have the right definition of neutral.
I think that Fizzy had a write-up somewhere where he defined what winning.
He did, but I don't know. It was the first attempt that anybody had made, so I don't think that's going to be like the best thing that ever exists. And also, I think there were like weird things that happened with like Ice Climber and
There'd
stuff.
be focus on it.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think personally, this is sort of like a pet theory of mine. I think number of projectiles put out is a stat that is very underrated with a number of characters. And I think particularly with Fox and with Peach, if you count turnips projectiles, because...
Doesn't Melee actually count that in the stat?
They do, yes.
It counts
so
thrown, I think, but not like pulled.
Okay.
Yeah, items thrown. So I think there's, famously Lucky put out that video about how lasers are especially good because they reset your stale move queue. So lasers actually do a lot more damage than it looks like they do because they cause your other moves to do more damage. And I think, currently it's hard to talk about whether, Leffen or Armada's laser game is better because we don't have those numbers, right? We don't know how many lasers they shoot, what fraction of their lasers actually hit. Thing that's relevant, because it's not just about can you shoot lasers, it's can you put your lasers in a good spot where they actually do damage. So I think that's one thing that I think is currently underrated. And as a Samus player, I think if it turns out that projectile damage is or is not more important than we think, then I think that's something that I would like to know if I want to improve my gameplay in the future.
Leon, what do you think of the just on a slightly similar note in terms of like quantifying like things that are quantifiable in game? I did something a while back that was very bare bones about like Mewtwo average KO percentage off grab conversions at different percents.
Right,
and the average amount of percents he got per grab. Do you think that's something that's still kind of become a little difficult to define or quantify or like draw a line from when a punish starts versus when it ends? Or do you think that's something that could be useful moving forward? Or what could it be worked on? What could be worked on that like initial idea to make it applicable?
Yeah, I think trying to define what a punish is going to be hard. But I think the kind of stuff like average percent at opponent kill and like average time opponent spent at above 100%, for example, those could be interesting things to look at and could sort of help players guide. I need to work on converting into kills at high percents, or I need to work on hacking on damage at low percents to get people out of crouch cancel range and stuff like that. So yeah, I think that's definitely a potential area of expansion in terms of melee stats.
Like a tech chase success rate, but it's so difficult. Like how would you?
Like that might be hard.
Yeah,
and it's not clear what that tells you about the player, because maybe they only go for tech chases that are like easy to get and stuff like that.
You could use like, I guess it would be similar to something like neutral game, maybe like percent per neutral game or like stocks per neutral game or something like that. But you could apply that to tech chases as well. Like if you have the option to tech chase or get somebody off the stage at this percent, what's like the average value option there?
Yeah, I think those are all really interesting ideas, but I feel like there's a lot of sort of low-hanging fruit in this area, and you don't even have to go into complicated stuff like
it could just be like move count, right?
Yeah, it could literally be like number of wave dashes or number of times grabbing the ledge. And like if it turns out that there's maybe there's actually a negative correlation between how much you grab the ledge and like your win percentage, and if people find that out, hey, maybe people are gonna stop camping. Or the other thing could happen and people could just become degenerate ledge campers, and this could be the death of Melee.
Yeah, and then whatever program we use to track it, people think it causes phantoms, and then it's
also,
all over.
Yeah, that's definitely.
It could be, yeah, even something as simple as like amount of jumps per game. For I think for most people that wouldn't be too useful for on its own. But even for a Marth player trying to scout out their opponent, I feel like those kind of like very simple stats can already give someone a good game plan to work off of.
Yeah, I definitely think that, if this does happen, it will be important to sort of be careful about how much you draw from certain statistics.
Yeah,
because it's easy to misinterpret them. If it's something like, it turns out that grabbing the ledge a lot means your win percentage is lower. Maybe it's because that means you get hit off stage a lot, right? And so you're always recovering, and so you end up. So, there's gonna be growing pains, I assume, if something like this does end up happening. But I think it's a very sort of rich area of possible exploration for the future.
The cool thing I think is that in pro sports, the availability of information to where, like, if you don't play basketball or football, you may not understand X's and O's as well, like the specific positional requirements. But as far as like the macro game goes, and understanding strategy and understanding even how teams operate and schemes of offense versus defense and like basketball and football, I feel like that's possible for people who don't play the game because there's such a wealth of information. And I guess I'm wondering, what wealth of information do non-players need to gain that same kind of macro insight, even if they may not have like good micro decision making skills or like as much situational awareness as you need to have to be a good analyst as a player. You know what I'm saying?
Do you think like if we would have access to this information, it would make people better players? Is that what you're kind of insinuating, Edwin?
No, I'm saying in football and basketball, it's very easy there's a wealth of information that's available for people who are not competitors to watch and instantly learn so much about the game and have such. And I feel like Melee doesn't have that quite yet, but I do wonder if it has potential, like 20 years down the line.
I think it's hard for fighting games because so much of the game is like mix-ups and small interactions and making the correct decision in a lot of places. And there are, any move could be the right decision in a situation, right? So it's not like, number of forward smashes is going to be a good proxy for, how good your neutral game is or anything like that, because it's all about when and how you do certain things. And I think if you look at a sport like boxing, I think I'm not too familiar with boxing.
Well, they have the punch count and like punches landed.
Yeah, but punches landed is something like, attacks landed in Melee. It's like, oh, it's better to hit your opponent than to get hit. Like, that's not that interesting. So I'm curious to see. I'm not, like I said, I'm not familiar with it. Maybe there is like an econometrics of boxing or something like that, and I just don't know about it. But it seems like it's hard for, games and sports where it's so much about individual interactions and decision making.
I think traditional fighting games are a little. I think traditional fighting games are a little easier just because their situations are a little more discrete, and their movements are more discrete compared to Smash, where like in Street Fighter when you jump, there's 3 jumps that you can do. It's jump straight up, jump at this angle, jump at that angle. I mean, some characters can like do variations on that, but you can really easily categorize that. So maybe the thing that we should be looking at for Melee is like trying to put situations into boxes. And of course, like whenever you do that, you're destroying information about the match that you don't know ahead of time is or isn't useful. But I think to the first start, the first thing we have to do is kind of like categorize situations.
Yeah, it could be interesting to see stuff like, percentage of time spent moving towards opponent or something like that. I think there are definitely situations in Melee where you can categorize things more discreetly. So
Yeah.
I think that's up to the people who make those kinds of tools to see what kind of stuff they can come up with. I'm definitely curious.
Yeah, I wonder if there's something like so football has obviously there's a thing called the fourth down bot in football that New York Times used to
Oh
run.
yeah, I know about this.
Yeah,
Zain
yeah.
Burke. So I'm wondering like if there's a similar kind of information that we can pull from Melee in terms of like helping people who are into Melee quantify how good or bad a decision is.
Oh, yeah.
And I feel like
That
that's
should be
so
a-
hard in Melee because it's so dependent on the individual matchup, and it's dependent on like what the opponent has done previously in a given situation.
Yeah. There should be a last stock bot where it decides whether you should have gone for that suicide down or.
Yeah, even things like that I feel like could be really cool to look at, and especially because Melee is so high variance and dependent. The results of a game depend on what the player decides to do in a given moment.
Mhm.
I wonder if there are tools that stupid enough to think that you
Robot.
can never optimize Melee easily, but I wonder how far you could get.
Yeah.
Right.
Because
Yeah,
there's
I
just.
think-
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I've been talking a lot, but I think there's always questions like, say you're Sopo, you're at 100% and your opponent is at 0%, and you like trade your stock for theirs, that's good, right? Whereas if you're at 0% and they're at 100% and you trade, then that's bad. It'd be interesting to see like where's the cutoff given, you're these characters with these number of stocks with these percentages. Like I think that's the kind of data that you could maybe collect where you can see, I guess the analog would be in baseball, the WPA is the stat, win probability added,
Mhm.
where if a given thing changes in the game state, how does that affect your likelihood of winning, right?
Yeah.
Like, if I'm up exactly 2 stocks to 1, then my likelihood of winning in this matchup is like 70%, so I should be willing to do, this risky of a thing. I think stuff like that would be interesting.
Yeah, but I think the general thing first is let's figure out, given a game state, what's each character's win percentage.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, that'll be
Someone
very.
Someone in the chat brought up a funny idea, the percent where like someone is crouching, or how many times, like what options people pick out of shield. Those are two other.
Interesting. Yeah, I would be curious just to see like when Armada is shielding, what percentage of the time does each of these things happen? Does he roll? Does he jump? Does he wave dash? Does he get grabbed?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, that'd
Man,
be cool
you
to
could talk
see.
about Armada's out of
There's-
shield game
There's
forever.
so many things. Oh, I just want this tool to magically be available.
Armada's out of shield game. There's so much like depth. You could conduct an entire study on how. Well, I guess this leads into
So much
like
of
how
that,
we
like,
talk.
kind of requires like computer vision almost in order to get.
Mhm.
Maybe that might be possible.
I think
I
it
don't
is
know.
possible.
I think just another tangent. My friend Vlad Ferroyo, aka XPilot, the guy who made the machine learning
He's a smarty.
Melee AI.
Oh.
He's actually been streaming his training matches. If you follow him on Twitch, you can see Melee AIs like duking it out. And so the way he does it is he reads in data from the game. So it's more like the fizzy way of doing things. I think he's decided that trying to use computer vision to see what's going on screen is going to be way too hard. So I don't know. I don't know if it's possible. I'm not a machine learning expert, but that would be interesting to see.
Well, I guess talking about stats like goes into how we actually write about the game, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which kind of makes me like, I want to bring up this point because I know it sounds absurd to like think of it like that, but isn't it true that content creation in Melee is basically like it does fulfill the same role as like journalism and any other entertainment industry, You have set amount of information or a set viewpoint that you have with a platform that people will take as fact or as meaning a lot. So I guess to link this back to the discussion we were having about statistics, like where does the responsibility, or like, I'm trying to find a good way to put it, but sort of how important is it to be careful with this kind of thing, even niche like Smash? Thinking like what data is useful versus what. I don't really know where I'm going with this. I guess, in terms of how it relates to statistics. But I feel like the two are connected.
What do you mean specifically by being careful? Like, someone like me saying West Balls hasn't gotten worse. Was that not just take me out of the equation? Making a video like that, is that what's the word I'm looking for? Is that not careful? I'll go with your word. Is that not careful enough for me as a content creator because we don't have enough data? Are we able to make conclusions like, well, I guess Axe being the protagonist of Melee isn't really a stat-based conclusion.
No, that was a totally
but what is, with such a small amount of data, are you trying to say with such a small amount of data, what are we able to even say with an amount of certainty?
So I want to say, in regards to the West Balls point, like I think it works both ways, right?
Mm.
Like I think you're right to go like present data in a reasonable format that fit what you were going for with the video. But I think inherently when we talk about Smash statistics the way they are, because there are so many variables that go to using them as a predictive measure. It's hard to draw any conclusions from it, even within the span of 3 or 4 months. And that's not a problem with you, or it's not a problem with like me and the whole like Smash history rankings or whatever. It's not even a problem with Melee stats in particular. It's just a thing that kind of like I've noticed more and more, like as content creators or as people that are into content, like when we talk about rankings and we talk about evaluating players, like we are ultimately committing a service of journalism. So I think by talking about stats, I think it's important we talk about like how they still ultimately are only so limited, yet they have so much potential. And I feel like in content creation, that's a barrier we're gonna have to cross.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Well, I'm gonna praise you here. So I think Save has, he's gotten some criticism about, his use of statistics, I guess, and talking about West Balls and all that stuff. But like, who else is making content that uses statistics at all?
Yeah, like I think it's unfair to hold. I think it's unfair to hold like this ridiculously high standard for, like I think it's like calling an opinion rash or knee jerk is fine on its own. But I think like the presentation of information itself that's not a bad thing, because there's an implicit understanding that this is all we have right now, you know?
Yeah. Back in the day when we were talking about, the first couple SSBM ranks, like it was basically just people saying like, well, I played against this guy and it was way harder than when I played against this guy. So I'm going to make this guy number 10 and he's number 50. So I feel like comparatively, like even, just the barest minimum of presenting statistics, not even doing like statistics per se, but even just saying these are the numbers, like I think that's leaps and bounds above.
Yeah, and like you have to consider like there is an audience for this kind of thing, and like they don't have to take it as fact. The point is that they have the information themselves.
That's what I not thinking. I didn't think all the way up to that level of we have the responsibility to kind of tell everyone to take this with a grain of salt because we don't have enough information. I think the most important part of any piece of content I make is that it's starting a conversation, that people are thinking about these things. Like, even if I make a video saying Chudat is just barely top 50, I don't care if you agree with me. I don't care if you read the numbers a different way. I just want people to start thinking about it. I think having a discussion in the Smash community is good, but having an informed discussion is not only like good for the community and its growth. I just think it's something that helps us. Actually, no, that's the only point I would make it. It makes us grow as a community is better, and it kind of just makes everything as a whole better, because instead of just saying, oh, Mewtwo King won Summit, I think he's number 1, we're saying, well, Mewtwo King won Summit, but he didn't play against players he's not good against, like Plup or other players. So he may not be 1 right now, but I think yada, 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 not to go on that. But I think having an informed discussion really helps build the community as a whole. And I think it's good for the health of the community. Yeah,
and I don't know. I just think I think it's very easy to discount a lot of work that someone puts by. And it's okay if you don't agree with them or you think they're... if you think their reasoning is flawed. But I just think like that, like it's a work in progress, and I guess that's why I wanted to bring up journalism for the sake of stats. Sheridan, you haven't said anything. Do you have any thoughts on it?
I mean, like anything else, your responsibility is in proportion to the amount of influence that you have. So it's really like first we have people consume right now, and like if one of you were to put out like a thesis about a character, could that affect like the discourse in the community about them? Or if you put out something about a player that was critical, like how big of an effect would that have? So that's like where I think it's most important to think about your responsibility. And I think you guys are all very passionate and doing it from a
Yep.
and so I
Sheridan, you're a robot.
think that still a robot.
Oh, no, you're good. You're back.
Good now, I think.
Okay. So I think even worst case scenario, the stuff that you guys are doing can be chalked up to an honest mistake. You of the game and you just express that, and that's great. I think the danger is when money or prestige on the part is a part of the equation. We're not quite at the point where that's a huge danger to like journalism in the Smash community. It's just something to think about. But for now, I think we're in a good state with the people that we have. Where we need to work on is getting data for people and just keeping up, encouraging the people who do write to continue writing and giving them adequate and useful feedback.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Edwin, what would you kind of building off that towards more the journalism side, because I would trust you more as the expert of that. How do you feel about the current state of journalism in Smash? Are you like happy to see all these smaller writers on the I think it's like GTX who's like has a lot of people writing for the website now? Do you think this is good for like the growth? I mean, obviously more people writing is good for the growth of the community, but how do you feel about the current state of the journalism in the Smash community?
Well, it's kind of a microcosm of a lot of Smash, right? I know that's kind of a trite answer, but the majority of Smash journalism is volunteer work at the end of the day, which inherently caps how much it can actually feasibly attain, you know? Like I don't want to be too personal here, but I've made a modest, like small like little cult following of like 2,000 or 3,000-ish people that consistently read my stuff over 2 years. But like I haven't made a dime off it, and I balance that with like my other hobbies, with my like day job and everything. And I feel like my route was a little unusual. I never did anything like work an unpaid internship at a company for exposure, you know? Like I had too much. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. Like if you personally did that, that's totally up to you. But I was never comfortable doing that, and I know a lot of people in Smash did have to do it. Or maybe not a lot of people in Smash, but I guess journalism as a whole had to do that.
Yeah.
And I especially see it in Smash, like volunteer writing. And obviously, like, it's good that people are passionate about Melee and Smash as a whole, that they're contributing. But I think, like so many other things in Smash, it's just not sustainable. And I think one other thing with Smash that makes Smash journalism, I guess, really tricky is that it ultimately still, like, it is growing, but it is still a tight-knit community. If I write an article tomorrow saying like Chudat is a gimmick player and sucks, and have like backup data or whatever to prove it, I'm just picking something like purposefully incendiary. Like it's not like I'm saying that about Britney Spears or something, you know, or someone far off. Like this is part of a community of people that like know each other, and like, it's hard to tell what is the line between a public figure versus just like actually being mean-spirited and picking on someone else, or saying something that's just directly insulting to a private person, you know? Like the lines have become kind of blurred between that in terms of like personally knowing a Smasher or someone in the scene that you're writing about versus versus like having an ethical responsibility to cover them, you know? And those lines are really tricky in Smash because everyone knows each other.
Mm.
Yeah.
It's so
I think
tight.
it's actually kind of similar to the rise of, I guess, video creation in Smash, because I think like that's kind of gone through a similar journey where, you know, back in the day when we were on like DC++ and
Right.
random GeoCities sites and stuff trying to track down match videos, people like nobody got anything from, you know, filming and uploading those videos. It was all out of just doing it for the love of the game, right?
And I feel
as
like you
time-
need that to. The thing is, it's this weird paradox I've talked about with Slime before, where in order to be a good Smash journalist or whatever, you need to be doing it for like the love of the game above all else. You have to like really have that hunger and fire within you. But the thing is, when you have that hunger and fire within you, most of the time at least, you want to play Melee. So
I don't think those are like mutually exclusive. Like I think you can still love the game and put your time into stuff around the game and not just play the game itself.
Sure.
Yeah, no.
For
yeah.
sure, but I think for a long time, and maybe that's changing in the next year, but for a long time the benefits of being a content creator, you know, that stuff gets really overwhelming over time without little reward. Like aMSa.
I'd honestly say at this point, might be a bit of a hot take, but it's probably easier to break into the scene as a content creator than it is as a player. Like the barrier to entry for skill is so high, even though we do have a lot of players. That might be a bit of a hot take. I'd love to hear what you guys think about that. But it's
well, I think that's I would agree actually. I think the degree to which that's true is basically proportional to the size of the spectating audience for a game. So if you have like a relatively obscure game, then you know there's not going to be as many positions available for you to do stuff like write or create videos or produce. Whereas, you know, the larger a game grows, like if you look at something like League of Legends, you know, there's a few hundred pro players, you know, who are making salaries in the entire world, but there's like entire industries and websites and YouTube channels built up around that. So
yeah, like if I put all the time I've been putting into my videos for the last year or so just playing Melee, I'd maybe win a local. But yeah.
So I think I don't necessarily disagree with the idea of making a name for yourself through content, but I think that the big thing is what is the benefit you get? A lot of views, like money from your website or from your channel. Like how does that, like it's such a time sink that has relatively low benefits, and like if you're invested in Melee, that can get really demoralizing over time.
Yeah.
And maybe that's just my personal experience, but I like through all of 2017 I went through really long phases where I just wouldn't write about Melee because it was getting so dejecting, just seeing no reward from it other than just doing it for its own benefit.
I think to that point about like whether it's easier to break in, like anybody can write a good article with the right amount of like writing training and just watching the game. What you can't automatically get is the exposure. And I mean, having your articles read by people and having them spread around, like a lot of that depends on who's reading them and convincing people to read them and convincing people to share them. And so like there's, for better or for worse, there's like some amount of like hustle, for lack of a better word, that has to go into breaking into there.
Well, this goes into a whole like dilemma. I kind of brought this up, the idea of the community being tight knit and making a name for yourself. But for a long time, like the original like quote unquote Smash journalist of the post brawl and I guess or more so the doc era was a guy who was still an active player and then later became a coach of a player. Like it's hard for a long time because it was multiple people filling those, or it was people filling those roles while having other responsibilities within the scene. So now we have this.
Who are you talking about?
Tafo.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, I guess that wasn't. No, I guess I could have just said him instantly. But
Right.
he balanced being a player with being a coach, with being a content creator, with being like somewhat of a journalist. And now Tafo obviously still does work for the scene, but I don't think he's as active as a Melee journalist anymore. Like, who are the Melee journalists now? Like Zain or Ipengu, like me, Slime. The Slime account as a Melee journalist. I think he would roll his eyes if I told him that, but
Not really, yeah.
he fulfills that function.
I mean,
Like Alex
same,
Lee,
sort of.
Oates.
Oates is great. I wish he wrote more.
Yeah, he's a fantastic writer.
Yeah, his stuff is good. I think I would maybe challenge a little bit the idea that you have to be sort of part of the
Like
scene.
you have to be in. That's the thing. You have to be in to be a successful Melee journalist.
I think most of the time that's true. I think there is one very important exception, and that would be Samon, right?
Yeah,
he is possibly the most important content creator in the history of the game.
Yeah.
And he was a relative outsider, right? Like, he was a player, but he put so much time and dedication into creating the documentary that even though, you wouldn't consider him certain like a community figure or anything of the game before that, like, he was able to create something that profound impact in the way it seemed. So,
Prague, I think, is another good example of it. Prague is as a phenomenal Melee journalist.
yes. Well, so not in the same way as Samox, though, right?
Yeah, well, Samox, that was his thing.
Uh-huh.
Which, without going into detail, hopefully I will soon join those ranks. But, but we don't have to go into that.
Soon enough, Eddie.
Yeah. No, I don't know. I just feel like it's a. Okay, I don't want to like put anyone on blast here, but also just like the Smash journalism is so thankless, because if you get something wrong or if you say something people don't like, you'll just get ripped apart for it. Like I wasn't a fan of the Kotaku article on like Smasher smelling bad or whatever, and I wasn't a fan of it just because I saw it as a non-issue. Like, it was kind of a silly like for fun but ultimately inconsequential piece. But I was actually really disappointed by how viciously people responded to that article, particularly the literal best player in the world, Hungrybox, and a bunch of Smash 4 figures I saw online that took offense to it. And I think it's fine to be upset about a gaming outlet using a negative stereotype of Smashers to lead into an article that ultimately doesn't even that basically barely gives a mild take on it. But I just thought the vitriol that author met and the claims of like an anti-Smash bias were ultimately kind of silly, and I was really upset by that.
I think
it just kind of
it fell victim to the typical Reddit thing where people read the headline and not read the article at all.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean.
But I mean, I still do understand.
No, I mean, when you enter the arena as a journalist or as a content creator, like that is what you get, and you have to learn how to do that. But I'm saying from the perspective of someone who likes writing for the scene, like that kind of stuff can get really discouraging, even if you are technically in the right, you know.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like I'm a little skeptical about that when it comes to the Kotaku article.
I mean, I don't think it was a great article. Like I think it's a slow news day kind of article.
It's hard.
What I'm saying is more, I think Kotaku got what they wanted from that article.
Yeah.
They got a lot of attention, right?
Precisely.
And maybe the author didn't want to be attacked viciously by the entire Smash community, obviously, but like, I think when it comes to a publication of that size, I think you do have to kind of think about what their motivations are when they make content like that.
I think
but they just lost their contact with the best player in the world. Like no outlet is gonna want to get rid of.
Yeah, maybe
no outlet is going into that.
I think it's hard treading that line between clickbait and getting people to read your content or watch your content, because if you just do not to just keep on bringing it back to me, if I just do like the title is a statistical analysis of Chudat's placings over the last 6 months, like no one's gonna click on that video. But if I'm like, oh, does True Dat suck? That's gonna get a ton of views. But with the it does, I think, like YCC said, it comes back to what's the intention there, like behind all of that. Like coming from an outsider to the community from Kotaku, a lot of people are skeptical like from the get that person is only putting out that title just to get views, and it's hard to bounce between having an interesting title with it not being clickbait. And I think an intention comes a lot into that, and people's interpretation of intention can be widely different with the exact same thing.
Keep in mind, I think there's definitely like critique to be had about Kotaku using a negative stereotype to lead in people to the article, knowing fully well that it will get a lot of attention for the controversy that pops up. I think that is a valid point of criticism that I would personally put. You can't just socially. Like, I don't like the practice of just write fairly negative things or any outlet that does that, of having an anti-Smash bias. I just think that kind of behavior is really ridiculous. And seeing that,
the weird thing, I think the weird thing is the articles seem to be apropos of nothing. Like, it just came out for. Why did it come out? Was it prompted by anything? I mean,
well, that's what I wonder. Like, from an outsider for our community, is that what they actually see? Is it our fault Is that what people genuinely see, like, as the top Smash news story?
Sure. Yeah. I wanted to go back a little bit to the sort of clickbait thing. Just my personal opinion is that, like, I don't really care if the headline is intentionally sort of clickbaity if the content is good. I think my personal example of this is Cracked, actually. You know, their headlines are famously like ridiculous clickbait stuff, and they make, you know, a ton of listicles. All their videos have these crazy provocative titles, but a lot of their content is actually pretty good. I don't know how many of those articles you guys have maybe read, but like they put out some good stuff, and you know, like there's it's sort of a dangerous line to tread, because nowadays there's kind of this backlash against clickbait in general. But I think, you know, in the end, I think you do what you have to do to be successful, and I think I don't have much of an opposition to people who take that approach.
I was just upset that top players and like people with actual platforms and like used it to just be extremely like standoffish or rude to this poor woman that wrote an article that was probably part editors like pressuring her to get something by the end of the week.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of like internet outrage culture in general.
That's right? True. I guess it's kind of expected.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like that. That's sort of how things work necessarily. But
yeah. It's kind of just sadly par for the course with anything online. When you have an anonymous platform to express yourself, it's easy to say to some random person.
I felt slightly less bad when I felt slightly less bad when I tried to calm down Ian Walker, that freelance writer for the FGC or whatever on Twitter, that was railing on the Smash community being like babies or whatever. And then I looked up that guy's history, and I just realized it was totally unproductive to have a conversation with someone that already had such a negative view of Smash. I was like, whatever, this guy is clearly not like interested in having a discussion.
Yeah, definitely knowing how to distinguish between somebody who is interested in having a discussion and somebody who wants to say their vitriol is a useful skill to have.
Yeah, I still like empathized with his. I feel like you can empathize with someone but still dislike what they what they say. And I guess in that situation, I empathize with the Kotaku writer, because I guess from my personal experience of like Smash journalism controversies or whatever, it's when I wrote Vidjo's blurb for the top 100, and I didn't make light of like the allegations against it. I bluntly acknowledge them, and the same for Shiz and Ryan Ford. And that I'm not saying this to like hype myself up, but I'm pretty sure I don't think many people in the community would have done that. And I feel like that's a fairly uncommon practice.
Yeah, I think you actually handled that pretty well, and I think the sort of backlash was relatively muted because of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have much else to say on that point.
Yeah, I do wonder what will happen moving forward as Smash grows or continues to stay the same. Like when it comes to top player controversies or things out of the game, what is the journalism outlet's responsibility to what is the threshold for it being covered by an actual organization versus just being seen as drama or a rumor? You know, those are difficult questions that I think about every day because I have nothing better to do. But wonder about the state of Smash. But seriously, like, what if it comes out tomorrow that like some top player or tournament organizer got arrested for something really horrible? You know, how does the scene move forward with that? How does the scene move forward with things if a public figure, like one of the best streamers or players in the Smash team, like gets into trouble, or just like even like the whole Minji situation was small, but like imagine if that happened to a major organizer, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like how's the community deal with that, just both internally and in terms of like what is goal
no.
report?
You roboted out for the last like 10 seconds.
Yeah.
Okay, basically all I said was Smash ethics is difficult, and balancing the good of the community with what is journalistically ethical is difficult. That's basically what I'm saying.
And
Sheridan, I'd be interested to hear if you have any thoughts about that. I mean, obviously you're a TO for one of the biggest tournaments there is. Like, do you guys have a sort of code of ethics or anything like that, or guidelines for determining what sort
We're
of
actually, tomorrow I actually have a meeting with some people to discuss that very thing. What kind of code of conduct can we draw up? Not just like, a copy and paste thing, but things that are particular to our community. There's like plenty of organizations that have codes of conduct, and it's easy to copy and paste stuff, but we want to use like the things that have actually happened in our community as like starting points for the discussion, and figuring out like what was this the right way or the wrong way to handle it, like using actual concrete examples, and like I mentioned before, your responsibility is in proportion to your ability to influence it, and so I have to take that responsibility very seriously, because people that come to events, if I let people into my events, I have some amount of responsibility for what they do at the event. If I could have foreseen them doing something terrible, it's partially on me if they actually do that.
Yeah, so I mean, like, what happens if an attendee tells you, oh, this person's going to your event? Well, I'm not going to this event because I don't feel safe around them. How do you navigate that as a major tournament organizer? You don't have to go into
a lot
detail,
of the difficulty about these things are it's so case by case, and it's so dependent on like the particulars of the situation, and I can't be like an investigator and a mediator for every instance of this that happens, much as they deserve that treatment. The people who are wronged by others, it's not in my capacity or expertise to do that. What we can always do is just we can work. You have to try to work out an agreement where the other person, if the person that's made uncomfortable by them, I think you have to ask them, what their part in this is before you take action against them, if anything, because everybody deserves to have their side of the story heard as well. And really the difficulty is avoiding a he said, she said, or whatever the case may be for all of these. So what we're trying to do is come up with a standard of procedure that we can give to everybody, especially TOs that don't have experience with this kind of thing, to figure out what they can do. But yeah, in general, like I can't ban people from my event just based on one person's unless it's like extremely heinous, based on one person's being made uncomfortable by them.
So how do you guys think, like, what do you think that, not the Smash media, but what do you think are writers or someone who's covering the scene's role responsibility? What is the threshold for them being able to report on something like
I mean,
that?
if
That's
there's
one
facts there, yeah, no, you should absolutely. If there's facts there, and they're of interest to the community, then you absolutely should report on them. I don't think it's starting drama. Like, if other people would use that information to make decisions, that are important to them, then that's something that they need to know. Like, as long as as everybody's had a chance to, like, the hard thing about things like that is making sure you get everybody's side and making sure that, like, there's not something sensitive, like, ongoing that you disrupt by reporting on it. Like, let's say there's an accusation against somebody, and but that person doesn't want that to be public, even though, like, other people are going to interact with this person later, like in future tournaments, was victimized that by them, doesn't want their name out there. They don't even want the other person to know that, like, there's action being prepared against them. So, like, there's some amount of due diligence there and understanding, like, the sensitivity of that information to all parties.
Yeah.
Sounds hard.
Yeah, no, I mean, these are
I don't know what
difficult
else to say.
discussions. Like, I mean, Sheridan, even the fact that you and I are having this discussion, like, you're in a position as we're like obviously as community members, we're looking up to you and the rest of the 5 and even the task force to figure out,
Right.
like, that's a hard responsibility that you have. And obviously, like, as Smash writers or content creators, like, they and Smash journalists or whatever, they have to figure out a way that they can reasonably navigate this tricky space. And it's tough. It's tough to talk about it also because we're also all 4 of us, we're all guys here, right? So obviously, like, taking into account difference in perspective, I feel like would be really important for this kind of topic. But at least in the confines of Smash journalism, I thought it was important to bring up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I feel like the scene as a whole is just sort of becoming more professional about stuff, as people grow up and as the scene grows and becomes more sort of people talk about esports, but like, things are getting bigger, right? And we talked about production
and nobody,
value.
I mean, the esports takes are so bad most of the time because
I agree.
It's such a
nobody
discussion
has-
over, like, these meaningless terms, and
exactly, like, nobody ever, like, esports is always used to mean, like, thing that I don't like, that
yeah,
didn't
agreed.
that happen before. It has it's almost nothing to do with esports half the time. So whenever somebody complains about esports, you should challenge them to actually say what they mean about what they think esports is. And most of the time, they won't be able to give you, like, an actual definition of what esports means. Or if they do, it'll essentially just boil down to these people in the community that didn't have any influence before, but now I have to share my influence with them, and I don't like that.
I don't want to go into too much detail about this, but I've had a lot of mixed thoughts on this for a while before just ultimately deciding that it's basically fighting over semantics. But yeah, I've talked about this before with like people from not just TAFO to, like, Slime to Save and people in the Melee Stats Discord, and I just feel like it's such a semantic debate when you start talking about, like, what constitutes as esports versus what constitutes as creative, like, and other things, and how it may manifest itself in esports or whatever. And I don't know, that's a whole other thing.
I think
it's difficult to navigate both.
Edwin turned into a robot as soon as he said eSports. Really makes you think, huh?
What do you
Man,
guys?
how long have we been on for?
Yeah,
This is like 2.5.
we're getting close to 3 hours. I was just about to say. You want to call it? Yeah, it was a fun show, and that was I really liked the discussion I got to be a part of here at the end.
Yeah, this felt like a 5:38 show. It's different, but I liked it.
Mm-hmm. So I think that's it for this episode of the Melee Stats podcast. Thank you, Leon, for coming on for the first time, and thank you, Sheridan, for providing your particular insight, especially in this last discussion. You had a very interesting and unique perspective on it. So see us next week, Tuesday at 8 p.m. And yeah, that's about it. See you guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Peace.